It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions.
Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Sunday, April 12th, 2026. Thank you for joining me today. Very important follow-up, I think, in the conversation around the Iran alleged ceasefire conversation. A lot has developed over the last couple of days that truly calls this to light, like more than it has so far. And just generally the Strait of Hormuz and the way this is being played, and overlap with the point we're going to discuss toward the end, and save off again to my interview with Corbett tomorrow. I'll touch on why that had to be tomorrow to discuss this deeper. Again, who knows? Maybe we'll both decide to go another direction, but I wanted to make sure we can get into that around the potential kind of engineering of this possible, I guess, just all of foreign policy, but specifically Iran and the Strait of Hormuz to engineer some sort of a larger transition of society. But there's a lot to get to around this one part. And that conversation is more theoretical and hypothetical, but very real. Shouldn't be ignored about, just simply put, whether or not all of this in some way is being organized, engineered in order to kind of invert the way the current global structure works with the flow of oil, with, a lot of different points, which we're not going to get into too deep today. I just want to update everybody on what's going on with this and why that's possible, but really shows you within all of this, just the long-term dishonesty of our government. Before we get into some of this stuff, though, one, I wanted to give a shout out to Corey, somebody who's left a few pretty, just very kind messages on my local, on my office line here. And I actually plan on giving a call back, but in case you're tuned in, I just want to really express how much it meant to me, what you've said and the support, and really just goes for all of you out there. I don't, honestly, I've had a note sitting right there for about 4 days to say thank you to Corey, just so you guys know, I wish I could make the time to say thank you to everybody. And we do our best to get back with handwritten letters and, but a lot of these things, emails especially, I really lag behind that stuff. But most of it I see some of it does get missed for a lot of reasons, but I just want you to know how much it means to me, all of you, how much you support this platform and how much you care about what we're trying to accomplish here. Now, before we get into everything, the Corbett interview, I left my last show with the plan to interview him, and there was a little bit of miscommunication. We are on the opposite sides of the world, so that's happened in the past. And we tried to do it then. We tried to do it the last couple of days, and the timing worked out for Monday, so for tomorrow, which kind of honestly worked out well, I think, because I ended up taking the weekend because we'd already kind of gone through the week. And what happened was interesting because it was a lot of hype, but not a lot of action. Today, we're seeing some actual change and some, well, at least more narrative more than anything, but actual evolution in the conversation. And so it's kind of a good timing that it all went down. Now, the main thing today is the blockade and this interesting timing. Now, that's why I wanted to at least point out the idea of the possible larger plan to this, because whether that is the ultimate, whether it's all some organized transition of society or there is something else, it does feel that there's a larger play here, which everyone seems to be thinking about, considering, and rightly so. That's what governments do. But it's interesting to see how this went down. Now, I'm going to say this just to start, but we're going to get into this in depth today. Let's not forget, and I've really stressed this, the Strait was not closed. From the very beginning, it was not closed by any definition of the word closed. It was restricted, and to what degree is really debatable. But it's undeniable it was restricted. Even if all Iran did was say we could do something, that would have an effect on who went through, whether of their own accord or whether the U.S. and Israel were threatening themselves or pressuring, which is a part of this. But so it wasn't closed. There was evidence of, first, which I'll show you the map again, just regular traffic of all types going through, lots of traffic, normal traffic, but tankers is different, and then also just cargo. Now, tankers were largely what were affected, but there were still a lot of traffic. So the idea that mines were ever in the conversation is insane to me, seeing as how there was tons of people that were constantly going through. I'll show you the map in a second right now. And I find that to be near impossible. Not that it couldn't have and hasn't, but did not happen this time. And evidence, I think, shows that. or the blockade point. So why did they say it was closed? Why did the entirety of the corporate media, mainstream alternative, and almost still to this very moment act like it's been closed? Because that's what the U.S. government narrative was. I think, like I said, that Netanyahu, along with the other things, the Israeli government, sold Trump an idea that was counter to the U.S. intelligence, as we knew. Everyone in the U.S. was, no, this is not going to work. It's not going to work out in your benefit. They're not seeking nuclear weapon. Our own evidence shows that. And then Netanyahu told him, I think, if you do this with us, this will enshrine your legacy, because this is all my thought. I think he told Trump that if we do this, Iran will close the Strait, because that's what a lot of people thought would happen, right? That's been a long-term conversation. And then the whole world will be behind you, Trump. The whole world will support you. And you'll be enshrined forever of the one who took down the Iranian terrorists, whatever. That's what gets Trump. And it didn't happen. And yet, like I've explained about the Ukraine and tanks rolling into Kiev argument, which also didn't happen in Ukraine's conversation, but that got reported repeatedly in the beginning, because that's what the U.S. government, I think, expected Russia to do. And they did not. And the same point here, Iran did not shut down the Strait, but the U.S. and Israel seemed hell-bent on using that narrative anyway. So they floated the mine idea. They lied about them shooting certain tankers, which, as far as I can tell, it was largely the U.S. government and Israel. And the one that Iran actually did, or I think there was possibly two, but the one I can prove was a U.S. military-involved dynamic. But either way, let's just even say they did attack U.S. ships that had gone through. It was very clear, as even Iran stressed, we are at war with them, not everybody else. Everybody else is allowed to go through. Now, that right there is debatable, whether Iran was lying about that, whether they did pressure certain people more than we noticed. That we should consider that. But it's worth also considering that it was largely open, other than the U.S. and Israel, and they created this dynamic to make it look like that was the case, or at least because, one, they wanted you to think it was shut down because they wanted the world to support them, and two, because maybe they wanted it shut down for this larger agenda that was, basically trying to invert the control, largely the bigger conversation, to get into the way the U.S. government debt is being used. Now, this might flip it to their benefit. Also, the idea of switching the flow of oil and the control of that and the interest of that from basically the U.S. having a more controlling, if not the controlling position. Now, that's all to say that that's possible. But the point is this about keeping the Strait shut so that can happen? Worth considering, right? So all this is to say that it starts at a point where it was not shut. They said it was. And then effectively, here we are at a point where, through a failed negotiation, which we'll get to, was always going to, because the U.S. and Israel were never going to let this happen, in my opinion. And now Trump, if you haven't seen it yet, is imposing or arguing he's going to impose a military blockade on the Strait. Now, what he said was either all in, or like basically either everybody gets to go through or nobody does. So in my mind, that means if he's going to follow through, that's an effective military blockade for everybody if Iran keeps doing what it's doing, which they will. So you effectively come all the way around to where they're creating the shutdown of the Strait and acting like it was Iran's fault. And I guarantee you they're going to spin around, if that happens, I'm doubtful that it will, and say, this is Iran's fault. Sort of like every other thing they do, or like Trump saying the Democrats won't fund the TSA. When you look at the picture, it's actually that they would not do anything until they gave them what they wanted. So ultimately, they were the ones that stopped that funding from happening from the Republican side. It happens both ways. But the point is about using these narratives that you create to make it look like they're the ones causing the problem. Now, the reason I explained all that is because we're at a point now where this is so mired in nonsense, just lies about every single element. And again, always kind of the way it is, but to a degree that I've never seen before over the last probably year. So that's why I want you to really think about this in a bigger sense. You shouldn't be, which my audience already knows this, question everything. It's in our DNA at this point. But for those that are new, or maybe they need to hear it again, just don't buy anything. Don't buy anything. Consider everything, question it all, but just don't just take things at face value is the better way to say that. Because there's so much going around from the U.S. government, from the Iranian government, just nonsense to get the narrative they want. So keeping that in mind today, let's start with some important points, I think. First, I just wanted to give, I am going to be going forward, going to be planning on, I still may do the Sunday wrap-up idea, but now I think just based on the feedback I got, I'm going to start posting the daily wrap-ups on the Substack. That seemed to be the large opinion for what people wanted. So it'll be there going forward, but I have to post it after the show's over because I have to upload the video. So it'll be there the next day, or if not the night of. And the article you see there, we're going to get to in a second. A fantastic article from Robert. Now, before we get into the large point, which is pretty much the entire conversation, just a couple of extra points that are worth considering that speak to the lies that are being spun and the what they're willing to deceive you about, and hints at what might be behind the larger agenda behind it all. We just talked about this. In fact, our last show, it's probably right here for you. Actually, a good point to do it on the Substack post right here, which we simply just asked the question: did Trump and Trump's admin fake a rescue mission? And I don't think we can prove that right now, but there's a ton of evidence that suggests that there's something quite amiss with all of this. And so I just want to point this out again, that Daniel McAdams asking this in the ninth: where are the rescued pilots? Now, there is a point to be made about, I guess, in certain circumstances where they claim that it's, I guess, normal practice to keep their name secret until there's no more risk. But I don't see in any way that meets these certain circumstances. We're told that they were rescued, that they're back, and it's just very strange how this all went down. So the bigger picture, in case you didn't see it, is that there's a lot of very, very valid evidence. Watch the last show if you want to get into it, that suggests that they lied about almost the entire story. Now, that doesn't mean there was no pilot. But if there was, that means in my mind, they used his plight to benefit themselves to try to steal the uranium that they could grab, and they failed. And Iran is claiming and all the imagery and evidence and everything shows that their ships were annihilated, their planes rather. And the ones they brought weren't right for the mission they claimed they were doing. Or there wasn't a pilot at all. And that's what gets so interesting about this, is that there's no names been released. There's no interviews. And are you telling me of all administration, this one wouldn't be parading this guy around to give his pro-US story? There's something wrong here. Now, maybe he died when they tried to rescue him. Maybe he didn't exist at all. I don't know. But it's insane to me that we're at a point where if you look right now for yourself, as of right now, no names have been released about who they are. No interviews have been given. No conversation beyond what I guess was just the narrative management of what they claimed happened, which, again, we can prove is not the way it went down. This person just says, oh my gosh, it's deleted apparently, but it says no one can explain why we've not seen or even told the names of the pilots. So maybe that means just now the names came out. Certainly possible. As I said, we don't know. But I wanted to point out, let's just say today, right now, let's say the pilots are out. Maybe they're interviewing somewhere right now. I would ask why that had to happen until then. Maybe there's a valid reason for it. All I'm pointing out is that it's odd. And I think the timing of all this is strange to me. But since they deleted it, maybe something's happening. Let me know. But I'm very skeptical about all of that. And I think my gut tells me that they manufactured something, or at the very least, used what happened there to try to initiate another agenda, which is not what you would do when you were trying to save an American life, in any sense, military or otherwise. Now, this is the interesting point, in case you didn't see this. This was fake. This was shared around. It's been deleted by most. Authentic photo of U.S. crews in recovery? No, it's a fake image. Texas Governor Abbott, who I showed you, shared this image and said, this is the greatest thing or whatever, and shared it out. And then, of course, he deleted it. Well, here's the link to it. Greg Abbott. But it's strange. Why would they fake images? Why would it, I don't know. Maybe it all lines up with information we'll get tomorrow. Be skeptical, guys, because we are being gaslit to a degree I've never seen before. Now, starting with Robert's point, I just want to reiterate the sentiment of, I don't think we should be trying to claim I don't think anybody could know for sure right now, other than those involved, whether the U.S. or the Iran are losing or winning. Because it's very complex, and I do agree with that. Effectively, yes, there has been. Now, the Navy part of it is, Robert is giving you quite a different point here. But there has been, they have bombed and sunk ships. They have taken down a lot of, in effect, in a way, controlled to a degree airspace. But that's not the same as winning or even necessarily being in control of the war, because of the way we've seen this go down. Because Trump and Israel are blustering and lying about almost everything. And we've seen the reality of what they claim, the interceptors running out, the reality of what Iran is able to get through and demolish all across the Middle East. It seems, if I'm going to be honest about it, objective with the evidence, that the U.S. is on its back foot. That there's the very least that Iran can last them out of this, and Israel and the U.S. will not be able to do anything other than all the way over the top, which is what we're kind of worried about. But this might change your opinion a little bit. Now, this says the Iran war has been a catastrophe for the U.S., but Israel once more. And I agree with that. I think this is largely Israel and Netanyahu driving this at the expense of Americans, which is what a lot of people, and largely even MAGA, were saying before we got here. And that's why we need Trump, because Kamala will do the thing that Trump just did. So he goes on to highlight the very obvious. I mean, if you need to be told right now that they've been contradictory with what they claimed they were going to accomplish, then you're a blind partisan, in my opinion, because it's you could watch compilations. It's embarrassing how one person then of the next will state there'll be overlaps. The Navy, begone, no nuclear weapons, but they have different general areas they're aiming for their objectives for where this was going to go. And my point is there, but yet the narrative from certain people in team sport Republican land was that they were all perfectly clear. And it's exactly, let me be clear, we have the same objectives. It's just not the truth. I've watched them just like anybody else. And we all know that if we're not being blind partisans. But so that's where he goes over the comparative. I'm not going to read it all, where they were contradicting each other. So keeping that in mind, under Operation Epic Fail as a question mark, versus their, whatever, I forgot the title was for the operation. The reasoning behind the motivations for the war have also shifted repeatedly. One of the most prominent has been the alleged killing of tens of thousands of Iranian protesters back in January. Just prior to the war, Trump claimed that 32,000 Iranian protesters were killed. Now, as I understand it, and I looked into this right in the beginning when the first was coming out, but I can't speak to every single one that followed, it was Israeli intelligence, like most of what the U.S. media reports in the beginning of things like this. It stems from what they claim they saw, and they don't question it. I mean, look at the BBC and Axios and all these different platforms that just recite what Israel says about what they accomplished. They bombed 20,000 in Hezbollah locations over the last, no, that's the last bombing. BBC claimed they bombed all these Hezbollah locations. No, they were literally bombing civilian downtown areas, and you can easily prove it. My point is they just repeat it without thinking. So in this case, saying 32,000 was maybe, as I said then, maybe, but the information comes from a group that's lying about everything they tell you. And then if you watched our work thus far, even Iran admitted to about 3,000 they said they killed. And remember, even the unions that were supporting the original protest pulled back and said this is no longer organic. These are masked, armed foreign people who are running in and burning police alive and building. And that's why they removed their support. And so what we know, because Mossad publicly said they armed people, Pompeo publicly said that. I mean, they've been admitted every which way. Trump even said they sent weapons recently. They told you the Kurds were armed. So this is not even worth debating anymore. They lied about what they did. So even if 32,000 people were killed, they created that by arming a bunch of people and throwing it at the government. What do you think Trump would do? So in early March, he began claiming the number was really 35,000 with nothing more to add to it before continuing to increase that number to about 45,000. Sort of like his whole thing where he, in the first 3 days, completely took out the Iranian Navy. He said that probably 7 times over the last year, or excuse me, over the last 2 months. Actually less than that, but over the process of this time frame. I was just thinking of the, post the time frame he's been in power. But he says, in the first 3 days, we sunk all 32 of their ships. And then a week later, he said, in the first 3 days, we sunk 58 of their ships. At this point, apparently, he's up to 150 or something like that. And so if the first 3 days you wiped out their entire Navy, how are you still sinking a ship? See, it's easy. Anybody who's not a complete blind follower will go, well, yeah, he's lying. Or at the least, he's just being a little fast and loose. You can give him the benefit of the doubt if you really want to go that ridiculous route. The truth is he does it all the time. He does it every single time he speaks. He adds a little bit of bluster onto almost everything he says. If you can't acknowledge that, then we're not living in the same universe. So after each contradictory number, Donald Trump has consistently insisted that the death toll was perhaps much more, which he does. That's exactly what I was just saying right there, with evidence or not, leading some MAGA influencers to then just begin claiming it was 100,000, 200,000. We all saw it. It got ridiculous. But consistently insisting that it was a little bit more is, it's kind of the carryover. It's like when he, what was it? It doesn't matter. There's another example I had. As for the imminent threat allegedly posed by Iran, right? So using the idea that they're killing all these people that was based on a complete misrepresentation. And even if you believe the numbers that they drove into reality. And again, I really want you to think about that. Let's say you think that they killed innocent people still, even though they armed them. Okay. If China was arming anybody, Republicans that lived in Texas, and just for whatever reason, they decided to go against Trump. If China was arming them, citizens who cared about this country, and they all ran at the White House, what do you think Trump would do? Even if they were screaming that we want to take over the country for freedom because we don't believe in your government. Is anybody going to pretend that that's not, they wouldn't call it terrorism? Is anyone going to pretend that largely the political side would side with Trump on? So we have to be objective about this. We know they armed them. We know they created this situation. So it's their fault, no matter how you look at it. And then we must be honest about the fact that they lied about the numbers anyway. So as for the general threat of it's imminent, right? We had to do this because they were about to kill us all. The imminent threat that was allegedly posed by Iran that allegedly triggered a surprise attack. There is not even a clearly defined narrative for this, as they've also been contradicting each other, from Rubio to Trump to everybody. Hegseth, the U.S. Secretary of State Rubio, claimed that the reason for the U.S. attack was that Israel has said it was going to strike Iran. So the United States had decided it had to join in because it or its regional assets were perhaps going to come under fire. By definition, as I said then, that is not an imminent threat, as you should know. And it also shows you that Israel largely drove this into reality, if that's accurate. Ruling out the imminent threat, he says, especially since Iran had just, by the way, as you know, offered the U.S. precisely what it wanted during the recent negotiations, which we'll come back to yet again, this one here. And this is really important for about 3 different stories today. It's incredible how he can sit down with them and they offered, right? No nuclear weapons. On top of that, they offered no nuclear enrichment, which they never offered before. On top of that, they offered to give up their stockpile. 2 of those had, as far as I could tell, had never truly been on the table. And then they bombed him that night. This was on the 28th. He's in an interview right here telling him all this, and Face the Nation couldn't even wrap their mind around it. He's saying, look, if we just give this time, we will achieve peace. Right? So the point is that they already offered everything they want. All the lies right now about how they refuse to give up their nuclear weapons, they refuse to say they won't seek them. Guys, they've been saying that every day for my entire life. Whether they believe or not, it's not the same as Trump saying they refuse to say it. They are saying it. He's not claiming he doesn't believe them. He's saying they refuse to say it. He's lying to you because that's all they've got right now. So when the imminent threat, basically going back to his point, ruling out the imminent threat, especially since Iran just offered everything they actually wanted, the American-Israeli coalition decided to carry out a surprise attack under the cover of diplomacy, which they've done numerous times. This underhanded tactic is one that has been employed many times over the years by both the U.S. and Israeli governments. And there's links to 2 different examples. Overall, the war was said to have cost an average of $1 billion a day ongoing, which would amount to just over $40 billion in only 40-some days. This figure, however, is a huge undercount, as various other costs are not even included. Now, Americans need to hear this, especially on top of that, since we're talking about $200 billion just for this war. And on top of that, I forget the number, I will get to in a second, of the total war military budget, which is trillions at this point. He promised the opposite of all of that. This figure, however, is an undercount. For example, February 28th, as you know, we reported this. The Iranian Shahed drone destroyed a USAN FPS-132 early warning radar system at the Ul Udeid Air Base in Qatar, worth $1.1 billion. Now, Douglas McGregor, right when that happened, said they took out the U.S.'s eyes. That's a big deal. It was. They really didn't report that. In the space, and by the way, why didn't CNN report that? Why didn't all the hateful Democrat media who wants to throw lies at Trump not give you the truth even when it's so bad for him? Because it's not really the reality. This game they play where they want to bring him down at all costs. That's not what's going on. Some people hate each other. Rubio and all of them for that matter. Vance clearly hate Trump. I just watched that video again today where they're all going, he's such an idiot. He's the dumbest person in the room. He's going to destroy the country. But now they love him, apparently. They don't. It's policy. It's power, guys. So the same thing here. They will all work together where it suits them every single time. In the space of less than 3 days, Iran shot down an F-15E fighter jet worth $100 million. So the point of all this is that there's been tons of money out the door on top of the spending for the war. So if these people were truly adversarial, they wouldn't be going, Iran war good, Trump just doing it the bad way. That's not the way that would go. They would be trying to put him in prison for an illegal war. They'd be trying to highlight all the money and all the lies. They're not doing that. Not really. And you can see it too. It says the U.S. lost first shot down the F-15E fighter jet worth $100 million. The U.S. lost 2 A-10 Warthogs costing around $20 million each, 4 MH-6 Little Bird helicopters costing around $4.5 million each. And this is in the space of less than 3 days. 2 C-130 transport aircraft worth approximately $100 million each. And 2 UH-60 Black Hawk helicopters were damaged, which each cost around $20 million to $80 million, depending on the version. A total of 24 MQ-9 Reaper drones and several MQ-4 Global Hawk UAVs were also downed by Iran, costing over $3 billion. This is not to mention the currently unspecified losses of air defense systems, or the many different things shot down like that we're not able to find out. According to reports, 3 THAAD missile systems were destroyed or badly damaged. Each THAAD system can cost up to $2.8 billion, while the interceptor missiles for that system alone cost $12 million per munition. And they're as far as we know, they've largely expended those fending off $50,000 drones. And that's after we dump billions in the hands of Israel, because that's just what the government does, apparently. Although Trump and Hegseth claim they have destroyed Iran's air defenses, they say this every 30 seconds, it's clearly false. Now, this is really interesting to me. Now, I actually want, I've heard this, but Robert did a lot of, basically the bottom line to make this quick and easy, because it's worth your time looking into this, is the lie is about the Navy being annihilated. Now, my narrative on that is it's very hard to be able to prove most of this outside of, because one, you could look at GPS, but as Robert's going to get into, that's not the full picture, is that, they sank some, but I was skeptical in the beginning. Like I said, it's a big deal either way. Sinking a ship like that is money, it's power, it's important. But does that then mean that they're truly being, losing essentially, right? Because the naval side of it, the airspace side of it, as we said, were largely expected to go that direction, which is why Iran planned, which is the point here, for this inevitability. Because Israel, they knew this was going to happen. So they planned, they hid and decentralized and buried their missile systems, and they put their ships in the ground, in tunnels, in, basically like mountain underwater, like tunnel, or rather like cave tunnels. And they posted this. Now, of course, they could be lying, right? Of course they could. But they've already shown these same kind of things when it comes to their missile systems and so on, which, here's what's funny. Of course, what you're going to get from the Zionists, see, their missiles and their tunnels, they're terrorists. The only reason this stuff came about was because they continued to attack them illegally while they were building their defenses like any nation does, and Israel would bomb them with no repercussions. So they started to do this, which makes perfect sense. The only narrative that makes them out to be a bad guy in this, whether they're all bad guy or not, is that Israel says it is in the light they want it to be. Every one of these governments builds tunnels and does the same things. Now, anyway, this is important. It says, as for the Navy, it reportedly, as Iran's claiming, remains largely intact. Which, of course, I bet you it's not, somewhere in the middle as usual, where the U.S. says they destroyed all of them, and Iran says they are largely intact. Now, it says, with most of its assets strategically hidden underground. The regional alliances that the U.S. accuses of sponsoring terrorist organizations are still intact. Iran's capacity to produce and fire missiles is evidently still intact, as shown by its continued daily launches. The point there is, first of all, if they have their Navy, then that means they did not effectively achieve that goal that Trump said he was trying to accomplish. Again, one of the points that he actually wrote that I just didn't say was that they're saying we've achieved all of our goals. They have not even close to most of them, right? So Navy, if that's the case, was the one that everyone seems to go, well, yeah, they did that. Well, maybe not. But the regional alliances that they claim, or they're allies, they're not proxies, but either way, they said Hamas and Hezbollah and Houthis. Okay, how's that going? They have not effectively stopped any of them. And then Iran's capacity to produce and fire missiles. They keep pretending they're shutting it down, but they continue day by day to show you the opposite. So here's this video. So all it says is, and this person down here, UK, it's a UK platform, reports something, whatever. And basically this person says, that's not what Iran's media said. It's an Iranian page on Twitter, basically calling it out and saying, it's just the IRGC Navy unveiling this report that was going to come out, an underground tactical attack boat storage. This was back on the 18th of January, like well before we got here. So there was no reason to produce this in response to the lie of their Navy being destroyed. This was out before this ever came to pass. So logically seems to make sense, doesn't it? So as far as I can tell, they haven't claimed to have destroyed their underground naval hidden locations. So it's very much worth considering that this is the case, but question it like everything else. Now it says, as for the projection of its power, right? So one of the last things is stopping Iran's projection of its power in the region, whatever that means. Iran has increased dramatically. And I think that's objectively clear to anybody. The Strait of Hormuz is currently under Iran's direct control. Now, today, you could argue things are maybe shifting. We'll get into that in a second, but I don't think it will. Forcing all nations around the world to coordinate with Tehran if they wish to transit the Persian Gulf. In this sense, the war has transformed Tehran into a major international player with far more leverage than it held before the conflict began. Now, one of the largest points is that Donald Trump, as I'm going to point in a minute, I think is losing and is ultimately now of the mind that they have to create the illusion of a success. So what do? They enshrine the things that were the reality. No nuclear weapons, open strait. And saying if we achieve these two things, and so Iran capitulated. When and I argue that won't even be the reality because Iran has said, well, we're not going back to that status quo. We're not going to give you back they're not going to allow you to pretend you won this. And even there's a statement I'll get to in a minute where Iran is simply saying we're not going to allow the U.S. to after failing in the military on the battlefield to achieve what it wants to then ask in negotiations to achieve those gains. That's not how the world works. You failed militarily, so now you're negotiating for those things. Not going to happen. And so I think this is pretty much the reality, to be honest. Now, Iran, we should question everything Iran is doing, but Trump has been lying every step of the way. about tankers that he was given by Iran, about who he was dealing with, the defector, the new regime he was speaking to. Do you realize how clearly those are all lies at this point? And we'll get into the mines and the Strait and all the rest of it, which also seem to be lies. And I think it's all built around trying to maintain a certain narrative, one, for possibly gaining control, which I don't think is in the cards for them at this point, without extreme action, which I worry about, or just to make it look like you didn't lose like it seems you did. Now, on top of that, this was yesterday, another U.S. Navy $200 million drone vanishes over the Strait. So who knows? Maybe it did. Maybe Iran shot it down. They don't want to admit that. I mean, it's like that's how this game is going right now. And I think what this shows you, and this might have to do with this conversation we'll get to in a second, of which seems like a lie, that they said, we put 2 ships through the Strait or whatever. We'll come back to that. That was Trump, I think, trying to make it look like he was in control while they were in negotiation. So just recognize another drone is missing. We'll think about that as we go through it. Now, $2.5 trillion. $2.5 trillion is Trump's total 2027 national security spending, or rather will exceed that according to antiwar.com. I mean, are we still pretending like this is less spending, smaller military, smaller government? Every single promise. And I really want you to think about this. If you disagree with me, point out where I'm wrong. Every single promise you were made, every single one. And I can't even, that seems unprecedented to me. You point out where something he claimed was going to happen actually came to pass. Everything, even the food dyes, which I said was a win at the time, that's rolled back. Fluoride, glyphosate, and that's just on the health side of it. You tell me. I don't believe it exists. $2.5 trillion. Same as, as I said, old boss, same as the new boss, or new boss, same as the old boss, right? Meet whatever that the statement goes. Now, on top of that, Treaty Parsi points out hotlines for the U.S. soldiers. Is that his name? Why does he add search to that? There's some weird stuff on this platform. Every day, like when I have an opening, when there's not a lot to talk about, there's some stuff that I want to get into. Just weird, creepy social engineering dynamics that are happening with all these AI bots and different stuff. It's just weird. Not that it has anything to do with it. I just think that's strange what that is. But it goes, now back to the point. Hotlines for U.S. soldiers thinking of leaving the armed forces as conscientious objectors are being overwhelmed. Now, actually, I'll include this because we go into a part of that in this show. Remember, and it's actually always important to remember the timing of this. Actually, it's funny. I have this pulled up in this episode for a different reason. But that's funny. There's 3 different reasons this episode's important. One, first of all, just remembering that they were already pushing, as Mike Preisner argued, and what people told him, they were already sending troops in under the guise of training way back when this is March 8th, as well as Graham publicly saying Trump is resetting the world. But before that became like the thing they started to say recently. Interesting. But in this show, we also go over this. The talk of when, the training point, but also the idea that people were largely calling these hotlines and saying we don't want to be part of the military. Why, as he says, almost all of them mention the bombing of a girls' school in Iran that killed like 175, 180 was what most estimates seem to be now. Schoolgirls. And it's not one like everything else in this ridiculous story. It's verifiable. I mean, for crying out loud, Hegseth himself posted the map of their bombing locations, and it's directly in the red of one of the bombing locations. They've just lied. They've just kicked it down the road. Nobody seems to care. That's the sick part about all this. Move this over here in case I remember that for resetting part at the end. So here's the show, by the way. U.S. Israel illegally bombing Iran, killing over 100 school children. That was February 28th reported that. Crystal Ball also highlights, I think we just posted this article. I just wanted to reiterate this again. Iran's school and hospitals in ruins, Times analysis shows, April 9th. So Iran, I mean, for crying out loud, guys, this is Iran. They're bombing Lebanon and Iran and Gaza all simultaneously. And there's stuff still happening in Syria, by the way. She says I don't know why. We are not the government, ladies and gentlemen. We are the people of this country. The government are taken from people in this country, but they are a separate thing. The U.S. government is not we. We are adversarial to the U.S. government. We are critical of the U.S. government. As a people, we are supposed to hold them to account. We are supposed to, we've so far lost sight with how this country is supposed to operate. Let alone, should we even have clarity of mind enough to go beyond what the government structure is and seek something where we don't need a government to rule our lives. But if we are forced to live in the state of society, we need to regain the understanding of what the Constitution actually outlines. It just kills me. Anyway, the point, continually, in every one of these locations, committing war crimes, bombing locations, 763 schools, 316 health facilities. And as I said, this is not Gaza. You have people everywhere in the world. They're filming and documenting, standing in the downtown streets, looking at apartment buildings full of dead people going, this is not a military location. It doesn't matter, guys, because our system is broken. Doesn't mean we can't fix it. In fact, what we're doing every day is to fight to fix this. The problem is that what that shows you when things are that obvious is the media apparatus, the large, whatever it is. They know we all see it. That's what they're all floundering about right now. That's what the whole change is about. The great reset, the technocratic change. At the end of the day, it's not working anymore. But what it shows you, Charlie Robinson's whole black hole analogy, we can't really see what that is exactly. There is a fixture there that stops it from, we can see it. Bomb 763 schools and have the entire thing not change unless there's something holding it in place. My point is you can see how it affects everything. The argument is with a black hole, the argument is scientists can't see it, but they can see how it affects everything around it. And so that's kind of the idea, is that you could see this. How is it possible this won't shift? Because we need to recognize what that is. I don't know exactly what it is, but I know first we need to keep fighting for the truth. Keep informing each other, keep sharing these things, and eventually, whatever that is, will be the last little spot remaining if we keep fighting for this. That's what I argue anyway. Bottom line, how can we be okay with that? Publicly, roundly reported. Now, Trump addresses his social media post warning that a whole civilization could die. Really quick point I want to make about this. It'll come back around in a second. But just this, because this actually came out today, or at least it was reported today by Fox News. But this weird retroactive thing, a couple politicians did this. Well, when he said a whole civilization could die, he didn't mean civilians. I'm not kidding. I mean, that's literally an argument put forward by Goddard, or I forget his name. That doesn't even matter. One of the mindless, faceless, Zionist politicians in our country. Guys, what does the word whole mean? You know what I mean? Like, do we really even have to do this? Like this game that's played? Like, of course, maybe he mentally meant something else. Maybe Elon Musk didn't mean Nazi things when he obviously textbook saluted. I actually don't even think I thought it was probably a troll, to be honest. But he did it identical to what it was. So this game we play where you go, that's not what it really was. Yes, guys, a whole civilization dying. I know this may be weird to think means a whole civilization dying. I know that's complicated, right? We have to deal with these people that aren't serious. Because it's obviously what that meant. I know what that meant. A child in the room knows what that meant. But then the Eric Howard, Nick Sorters will come in and be like, you're so crazy. You go Democrat snowflake. You don't know what you're talking about. And people cow to it, I guess. I don't know why, because they have a false number of 1 million followers on there. I don't know. He clearly said this because that was a threat. Now, and that's even what most people are admitting, because it was meant to be a tactic. Okay, well, let's talk about that. But here's what he says first. Trump says his whole thing about a whole civilization dying, arguing that the comment brought the regime back to the bargaining table. Oh, did it? Quote, I told my people I want everything. I don't want 90%. I don't want 95%. Right, because that's what a negotiation is, where you get everything and they get nothing. I mean, his bluster and hubris always shows you his hand. How in the world can we pretend you're negotiating for a middle ground when you want everything? Right? Or how about the idea that you're arguing that's threatening the destruction of an entire country that the whole world took as a nuclear threat was somehow a bargaining tool? Okay, Trump, what if they took you seriously and then launched a nuclear weapon? Because that's totally not possible, right? Aren't you the one telling us they're a belligerent, lunatic terrorist state with nukes? Well, doesn't that in and of itself prove to you that they know they don't have them, guys? If you're smart enough to see what I'm talking about. But either way, the idea that this couldn't, what if other countries took them seriously? It's like, what's the right word for it? Not belligerent. It's definitely ignorant. It's definitely dangerous and irresponsible. But there's to be a better word for anybody that would pretend like that makes sense is a child. Like utterly blind to whatever we're talking about. Okay, if China was like, we'll destroy your entire civilization unless you come to the table and make a deal. What do you think Trump would do? What do you think Graham and the rest of our ridiculous media would do? Oh, they're threatening to destroy the world. Well, they didn't mean that. Well, it's reflective on it. It's obvious, guys. So the reason this is important, though, is for what we're going to talk about next. But I just think it's embarrassing we give these people any kind of standing. They're not real, guys. And I don't mean that. They're not serious people. So here's one of these people, Liz Wheeler. She says, the ridiculous claim that Trump wants to start nuclear war or genocide or any people were never true. Oh, you know that, do you? because your opinion is that he wouldn't do that. That's what you get. Your opinion framed as fact. That's new media for you. Of course it's possible. Of course it's possible. So to say it's not true means you either know that as a fact or you're framing your opinion as the truth. And the reality is it's obviously possible. Israel could do it tomorrow, and Trump could as well if he gets cornered enough, I would argue. But genocide is already ongoing, by the way. But she says it's clear today, just as it was, and this is, by the way, on the 10th, so it's the 12th today, and it did not go the way they're pretending it was right now. And it says, to anyone who's paid attention to Trump the past 10 years, that his true social post of the whole civilization was a negotiating tactic. Well, that's what anybody with a brain said was one of the things that people like this would say. And even that it might have been what Trump thought was the point. In fact, I argued at the time, it seemed the most likely. That Trump was basically just, as always, you'll see an attack you've never seen before, and then nothing happens. Now, there was threats and attacks that have followed in the recent series, but more often than not, he blusters and then, well, we're going to give them an extra week because they said they're ready to negotiate. And Iran's like, we didn't even talk to you. It's just game, right? So my point was it was probably just another big bluster to get what he wanted. But guess what? He didn't get what he wanted. Iran was always willing to come to the table to end this. And as I said, and I think it's pretty clear now, Trump offered them everything they wanted, then turned around and acted like they lied about it. He's trying to frame this and manipulate this into a way where it looks like he got what he wanted when he knows he's losing. That's what I think is happening. And it says, and yet, so these so-called conservatives who trans themselves into leftists. Don't you love that? Doesn't it just show you the game when you were claiming, okay, you're claiming someone's a conservative. He's probably talking about Tucker or whatever, even though they're not really giving you the full picture, who then say, Trump's doing a wrong thing. And they go, whoa, they're lefties now. Oh, so I get it. So the only thing that differentiates you from being left or right is if you blindly follow Trump. You guys are such children. I mean, laugh at these people because you have to realize America first is not fighting Israel's war in Iran. America first or less military or less spending or smaller government are not all of those things on display right now. So these people are just dumb. And what they're doing is acting like anybody calling it out is suddenly a lefty because the game is you're either on my side or you're not. Trump said, if you disagree with this, you're not on my side. If you believe the Epstein files are important, you're not a conservative. And that's why he's lost all support. Other than people like this who are shameless and have no scruples, guys, they don't have principles. But let's be very clear. She says the Panikins were wrong and you and I were right. Okay, in what way? One only nuclear holocaust that happened was the untold damage these Panikins would do, literally selling their souls. So just to cut to the chase, what she's saying, she was right because look at what happened. Trump's getting what he wants. Or that's not what happened. Whoopsie. Funny how you jumped ahead and were wrong. Okay, because right now, what they were insinuating is that Trump's opening the Strait. See, it's already happening. I'll show you that middle part of it. And it didn't happen. And now it ended up where they're threatening again. We're going to do our blockade. Okay, so in the middle of this, you got these screaming people that act like Trump won already. So if he won and it's open, why is he now threatening to open it with military power? It's because you guys are ridiculous. So here, before we get back into we're going to go through like a timeline part of it. I want you to see first. You even had Lindsey Graham saying, if the Iranian leader won't accept the deal, he will be dead. So, okay, so Trump says, the end of the civilization. Oh, it's a tactic. Okay, well, is this a tactic? It's a crime to just blindly. I mean, you have to understand, either way, I guarantee too many people in our political sphere who think they're honest would argue it's not a crime to do what they're talking about. Either way, this is not how you negotiate. So you're going to tell me that it's okay to threaten their death if they don't agree with what you're saying and then act like that's a fair negotiation? Guys, we live in a cartoon. Nobody in the world thinks that. Are you going to pretend that Trump would accept that? It's all you got to do is invert the reality, and that's not how anybody would look at it. So what you're doing are strong arm tactics. What you're doing is terrorism, guys. That's what you're doing. I don't think I got the clip, actually. It's not important. It's exactly what he says. Literally, if the Iranian leader won't accept the deal we've offered, then we'll kill them, which is what they already floated before. And in fact, even the Washington Post put the same thing out. But as Saeed Mohammed Marandi points out, here's what, I forget what account this is, but it's an Israeli government-connected account. If negotiations fail in the coming hours, there is no guarantee that the plane carrying the regime's terrorists will reach Tehran. And as he says, who are the terrorists exactly, right? Well, here's what even the Washington Post put out. It says, Iran thinks it has leverage. Here's how Trump can prove it wrong. And what they say? Fourth of four things they're listing they can do, carry out a final barrage of leadership strikes, eliminating the Iranian officials who had been spared for the purpose of negotiations. I mean, people rightly are going out. How are they any different than terrorists right now? The New Washington Post are literally calling for a terrorist act. And as Reza points out, this is unprecedented and outrageous. I wouldn't say unprecedented, to be honest, but it's outrageous. The U.S. has sunk so low under the Trump, how does he write? The true Yahoo. He means like Trump and Netanyahu put together. Their regime, that it now feels almost normal for a news outlet to publish a piece openly recommending the assassination of foreign diplomats if negotiations fail. Those are not military targets, guys. I don't care what you try to argue. Even calling them terrorists does not give you legal cover to just murder people in the middle of negotiations or outside of any military context. And as he rightly points out, the U.S. might as well close the State Department and outsource its foreign policy to MS-13. Is that not exactly what they're telling you they do? They threaten, they strong arm, they steal, they are terrorists and pirates right now. No different if you've been paying attention. So, J.D. Vance, going into the point to start, this is back on the 9th. Just to remember, we went over this in depth in the last show. Pakistan was involved in the agreement. Pakistan's foreign minister posted that, tagged them all, and it was later revealed that they signed off before he posted it. I covered that in the last show. Just reiterating that point here, Daniel McAdams points to OSINT Technical saying CBS said Trump had been told the ceasefire would apply to the Middle East, and he agreed that it included Lebanon, as did everybody else. Every diplomat said this was the case, other than the ones that are lying to us, like Kushner and Witkoff, which I think it's obvious. Mediators, Iran's foreign minister, and Pakistan's prime minister also believed it did. That's just the same point. And again, don't take their word for it. I already covered this. It's already the only groups denying this are the ones obviously denied. Iran, U.S., but you have every other part of the conversation saying we all agree. Like, they're lying, guys. It's pretty damn clear. The U.S. position reportedly shifted after a call with Netanyahu and Trump. I'm telling you, it's very clear. So he said, we're not going to stop this. I'm in control. That's not happening. And they all just lied about it. Rubio goes on to insinuate that Ghalibaf might not speak English, even though he speaks multiple languages, and apparently Rubio doesn't. We live in a cartoon. So, I mean, the idea is what Iranians are terrorists in caves or whatever the dumb thing is people want to think in this country. And you're making fun of this guy. Maybe he doesn't speak English. I mean, and he's more educated than you are. It's insane to me. So on the 9th, Nick Sorter says, Donald Trump says oil tankers will immediately begin to flow through the Strait. Okay. So remember, the 9th is 2 days before the 11th. Yesterday was the 11th. The 11th was when they were going to meet in Islamabad for alleged nailing down of the 10 points that they claim Trump already agreed to. It had already been broken because they violated within less than 24 hours. The U.S. and Israel bombed Iran, Lebanon, and Gaza, for that matter, which does matter. It's the same conversation. And they right away said, okay, well, this has now failed. Now, for whatever, I mean, I do know why, at least as the argument goes. Trump then apparently spoke up and said, I will reign in Israel if you meet us in the 11th. And apparently they took their word for it. Now, here's what's crazy to me. The fact that they even met again on the 11th, which they did, and if you've probably seen what's happening, it failed, right? Because the U.S. was doing what it always does, is insane to me that they would meet them yet again. Now, I argue they felt safer in Pakistan with other mediators around them. For them to bomb that would be even crazier than the rest. So I think they felt they were safe. But either way, why would you meet with a group that you know has no intentions of peace, no intentions of even honest upholding what they claim, right? But they did. And I think that speaks to two main things. One, that Iran very clearly has interest to bring this to an end. Otherwise, why would they even be dealing there? And two, that it very clearly shows you the U.S. does not have the leverage it claims it does. That clearly, we may see, they have military power. That's never been unclear. But they do not have this upper hand they keep claiming. They wouldn't be, if they were completely annihilated, obliterated, whatever he says that day, they wouldn't need to negotiate. They would just take it. Now, you may argue in other circumstances, other powers, other governments, maybe they would want some kind of a transit. Not the U.S. government. I mean, guys, they will blow up anything. They will invade and take and steal and occupy. We look around the world, and you're going to pretend when the one they've coveted their entire lives, they wouldn't just take it when they could. It's just so naive. So the point is, this was already failed on the 9th. There was no, at the moment, they hadn't even agreed to, I think Trump was just saying, we'll reign in Israel. So the point is, he's saying, we're going to begin to let tankers through. Now, my point was they were already going through, not to the degree, not the level they should. And in the midst of this, there was this weird pause for like 15 allowed. Well, that was the U.S. that put that in. So at that point, I argue, and I think it was something like 100 something a day on average before, or whatever it was. So before that, Iran was arguably letting through anybody other than the groups they were fighting, which could have been a lot. Could have been basically everybody but U.S. and Israel and those that were involved with them. Then with this weird little middle ground ceasefire before the 11th, the U.S. put in their 15 a day. And that was the only amount that was allowed. So they effectively shrank the amount that could exist right there. Okay. So now Trump's saying immediately begin to pass through. And I think he said this because he was trying to frame it as he won, right? I got this to happen, even though one, it was open before this started, and two, it was never truly closed. I hope you're following because this is all important the way that it goes along. So then he posts the Wall Street Journal, one of the most, and this is on the 9th, one of the most inaccurate editorial boards in the world, like all mainstream media. They lie all the time. Doesn't mean this is incorrect. That what they said was incorrect. It could, but he goes on to say, stated that I declared premature victory in Iran. You did, man, like 1,000 times. I mean, is he even, it's wild what he keeps doing. And he says, actually, it is a victory and there's nothing premature about it. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, the point was he declared victory. And I mean, this is what's so sad. Are you still fighting? Or, okay, so right now, are you saying that we're going to use our military to open the Strait? Then you are still fighting and you are still bombing. So it wasn't victory yet. I mean, it's sad that that he feels so insecure that he has to lie about that. I think my gut opinion from the very beginning was they already knew they were losing. That's why he tried to declare victory. I'm telling you guys, this is what they do. This is desperate. But actually, there's nothing premature about it. He goes, because of me, Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. Yeah, again, the thing that they already agreed to. They already said they would. And the thing they never had, and that your own U.S. intelligence already told you wasn't the reality. So you effectively achieved what was already there. Good job, Trump. And by the way, in a way, he may effectively achieve the opposite of that if he again, is Iran, like anybody else, has the right to civilian and nuclear weapons capacity. So does every other government in the world. Iran just says it's a fatwa. It's a religious issue. They will never seek it. And our intelligence and the International Atomic Energy Agency have always upheld that all the way to the very end of 2025. They've lied. On top of the fact that Trump told you he obliterated it all. So fun, right? And it says, very quickly, you'll see oil start flowing with or without the help of Iran. And to me, it makes no difference either way. You see my point? Like, why do you even say that? Obviously, it makes a difference, or you wouldn't be screaming about why it needs to happen. So if it makes no difference, then why is this even going on? He's doing that because he thinks it makes him look like he's not, I'm not worried about it. I'm completely in control. I don't even care. I'm just going to stand over here. You do what you want, but I'm going to kill you if you don't do what I want. We're dealing with a petulant child. I mean, every day it becomes more and more embarrassing that somebody like this can make a statement like that, and yet you get all the talking head clowns that act like he's the most intelligent person in the world. You don't care which one. Anyway, I feel like I want to waste time on the stupidness of these things, but I feel like that matters. Like that he's so I guess just childish, but like an insecure desperation that he has to pretend like he's not really concerned which way it goes, when clearly he's so wildly invested in the outcome. And it says the Wall Street Journal will, as usual, live to eat their words. Yeah, we'll see about that. They are always quick to criticize, but never to admit when they're wrong. Sounds like you guys. So the point, weapon, which they never sought, and that they'll see oil flowing, right? And so here he goes, we did it, we won. That's what they want from them. Now remember, this had not actually happened yet, but I said exactly as I thought. Trump is claiming that ending up where he started, but in a weaker position, is somehow a win. They agreed to give up their stockpile on the 28th, link below, but you guys bombed them on that day. The Strait of Hormuz was open before you started this. Nick, #winning. And I'll come back to this as well. I want you just to see it. This is right now. So you want to tell me that there's mines that they can't find all floating around? That's what Trump is saying. Iran's denying it. I don't think it's true. You want to explain that to me? Random fishers, random cruise vessels, that's all. Those are all ships. Now the tankers, let's look. Actually, look, I'll come back to it. Let's see what that's at. Same as before. They seem all clustered right here. There's quite a bit of them. Right? That also doesn't seem like nothing. I mean, realize only the ones that are fighting with Iran arguably are the ones not allowed to go through. Now, had Trump initiated the blockade, he's arguing nobody can unless Iran gives up. So he's the one creating the blockade. If that actually happens. Now, let's keep going. So here's what he said. This is just interesting on the narrative. No, they haven't been, I guess, conceding. Like, so Trump goes, we're going to do this and you better do that. And Iran just continues what it's doing, right? So at some point you realize that they would, if they were super scared and ready to capitulate, that this wouldn't be where we were, right? That's what everyone keeps claiming. You know how we know they're winning? Because Iran came to the table. Okay, then why did they refuse right now? You know, it's just a lack of logic and it's partisan blindness. But here's what Trump said. And of course, clearly because he's got such a good response, you know that he's not in a weak position.
How do you know that? What?
So it's so low. It says, you know, I'll just read it again. She says, Iran is not listening to your threats about reopening the Strait. And she says, how do you know that?
You say that?
Because it's still intact.
Why do you say that? You don't know anything. Who are you with?
NBC News, Julie Circus. NBC.
Well, let's make sense.
Mr. President.
Let me just tell you, we win, no matter what.
You got that, guys? Let me tell you, we win, no matter what. Cool. We win. What are you, Big Daddy? I mean, what a ridiculous thing to say. Just because. I mean, that is the kind of jingoistic, just like that's the red meat for the dumbest in the room. Yay, because we're the winners. It's like, what kind of person thinks that's an honest response? But on top of that, oh, you're fake news. Well, yeah, they're all fake news. You lie every time, Trump. But the idea that just by going your fake news, like that's some kind of a dunk today, God, that was barely a dunk when you first started doing it. You know, it was like you were glomming on to what we were all saying. It's getting tired. It's stale. Okay. The reality is an obvious question. Well, if the Strait, it's not closed, like, see, they're playing the same game together. But if it's still restricted, if they haven't changed what they're doing, obviously they're not listening to what you're saying. Like, and he just doesn't like that. Oh, we win no matter what.
We've defeated their military. They have no navy. 158 ships are underwater.
158. There you go. I mean, I already played you the one before, and we said all 3 days we killed them all. 58. Now it's 100. You know,
They're undersea. All of their minesweepers and all of their
minesweepers.
They call them mine droppers. Can you imagine? A country has 28 mine droppers. You think that's nice? With all of
what does it even mean? So, like, you don't have munitions and weapons and stuff? You know, you have to see how weak their position is. If now it's become that they have missiles and stuff, so they're bad guy, well, that then makes you bad guy, Donald Trump, with your really smart logic. It's just sad. But that's his response. We won and defeated them, and they're empty, and they're not doing as missiles are flying and bombing Israel and bombing your bases. And, you know, it's pretty pathetic. Now, as I've said from the very beginning, there may be something, maybe when this ends up, there'll be things that we don't see that make this all come together with exactly like he said. But that's still, the point is where we're standing, the evidence is not there. If he wanted to give you things to back up what he said, they could do that. My point in saying is that this is the correct way to report on what we're looking at, whatever ends up happening, because this is where we are. Now, it's the same. Now, it's funny that comes to mind. That's not the same kind of thing as what, like, what was his name? Scott Adams sort of thing. I was wrong. I was right, even though I was wrong. That's not the same idea, right? Because what he's saying was that he was claiming what he was doing. The truth was that the evidence was there. When we were talking about the COVID thing, well, we were reporting the evidence that he said wasn't there. We were showing you the science that showed you they were hurting people. He just claimed that, well, we were accurately reporting that they were safe because that's what we had at the time. He was wrong about that. See, that's the difference. In this case, unless we're missing something, the evidence is all out there. I'm telling you what Trump is saying. I'm telling you what Iran is saying. We're looking at the full picture of the data, and Trump's been caught lying endless amounts of times. I mean, that main point about the tankers he was given by the other 8 of them, 10 of them, 20 of them that went through, guys, they've proven to not have gone through. Didn't happen. And yet nobody seems to really fixate on that who has the reach to make that a big deal. So moving into the timeline. Okay, so here's on the 10th. Donald Trump says, Iranians don't seem to realize they have no cards. Right? So if that was the case, we wouldn't be here. So that in and of itself is kind of embarrassing, right? So you're going to deal with them even though they have no cards. You know, the only thing you could pretend is, oh, he's a humanitarian. He doesn't want to hurt anybody. Well, that's clearly not true. So you're bombing and murdering and genociding, but now you give them the time to. That's just sad. And if you read Trump's books, he doesn't deal with people who have no cards, right? So the point is they got no cards other than a short-term extortion of the world by using international waterways, which is not what they were doing since it wasn't happening until you started the war. Funny how that works, right? It was open, and then you start the war, and then the goal of the war becomes to open the thing that you closed by starting the war. Hashtag Patriot. The only reason they're alive today is to negotiate. Right. So basically, we didn't murder them all, which would be a crime, because we want to let them negotiate for things that we'll give them. So we'll give concessions even though we have all the power. Does that sound like Trump? Does that sound like what anybody would do in any military position? No. He's lying to you, in case that wasn't clear. Now, to make that more clear that they're in a weak position, what you're now finding is the rats fleeing the sinking ship, which is the Shah, interestingly enough. Now, this is in, was it Farsi? I forget, another language. And it says, Pahlavi, which he did on many interviews, distanced himself from calls for military action against Iran, where he just said, guys, on the 10th, we never sought military intervention in our country. Well, son of Iran's Shah urges U.S. military intervention. That's on February 14th. Now, that is an article, but guys, I've watched him give discussions about this. They have been screaming for military intervention forever, saying the bombs are freedom and we're cheering for the bombs. And now they're losing. And so he's like, well, we didn't want that. That's bad. Yep. That's people that have no morals, no principles. They are fleeing to go along with what works for them. Now, same kind of example. What we were hearing in February. Kill the Ayatollahs, kill all the terrorists, and destroy the okay. And now in April, well, let's make a joint venture with the Ayatollahs so we can work to make tolls through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, I doubt that will ever be the reality. Or that was more of sort of like probably a manipulation tactic. But to even float the idea that you could work with the people you just said were terrorists, hey, well, welcome to Syria. You know, I don't know how you don't see that as desperation, guys. Now, this was yesterday. On the 10th, the 11th, Iran has formally submitted. Now, this is important. This is before. This is the 11th, just about to start the supposed negotiations after Trump had said, will, I guess, reign in Israel. They did not. Israel bombed Lebanon just like they were every other time. So I don't know why they let that go, but so be it. And that's actually one of the main things that spun this out, because Israel was still bombing Lebanon and they all knew that was part of the deal. But before they sat down, Iran has formally submitted its red lines for peace talks with the U.S. So you have to understand this, guys. They knew well when they walked into this, but it was already the case. They knew because Trump was offered that 10 points that's what everyone was on the same plan for. And then Trump just lied about it, in my opinion. So before they ever sat down, they said, look, these are the red lines, guys. Authority over the Strait of Hormuz, payment of war reparations, unfreezing all blocked Iranian assets, which I'll get to in a second, which I find hilarious with the whole Obama narrative that they lie about all the time. So what were they expecting? This is very widely publicly covered. I mean, what are we somehow expecting them not to demand the things that we all knew they were demanding? And all of this only came to pass because they started an illegal war. Before this, the Strait was open and they weren't charging tolls. And they just simply had security control should they choose to apply it. They weren't hindering any ships. Not as far as I've ever been doing this. And now remember, this is interesting. Remember the Bolton and Trump's first administration, the whole limpet mines thing? You think that's a coincidence? They lied about the whole damn thing, guys. They manufactured that for the same reasons. Now, payment of war reparations, that wouldn't have existed without the illegal war, right? Unfreezing blocked Iranian assets, they weren't asking for that before they started this war. So you essentially created a situation where they put their feet down. Now, on the next day, well, a couple hours, like borderline, CNN reports this is technically still an hour after that, but still at the 11th. CNN reports talks between the United States and Pakistan are largely positive. CNN, the platform that is hell-bent on destroying Trump, and they'll even lie about him to do whatever they can to bring him down, blindly reports what the U.S. State Department for Trump says happened. Because that's what happens when you have a hell-bent, obviously not. They're all on the same team. But it says Iran's team says that U.S. made unacceptable demands. So funny how that works. So the U.S. comes back and goes positive. Well, we know how this ended up. It wasn't positive. Nobody agreed. But for some reason, the U.S. wanted to tell the world that it was going positively. They lied to you about everything. And Iran's team says they're making unacceptable demands. And so that's the idea. They sat down and they just said, we want things that we'll go through it briefly, but it's everything you already know. They're demanding they just basically become a vassal state controlled by everybody around them, have no defense, have no missiles, have no allegiances. No one's going to accept that. And they also just wanted to gain things that they would have won militarily. And Iran says that's not going to happen. A group in a weak position, desiring an end, would not push back like this. Now, Iran, on the 11th, their sources said the U.S. has agreed, which very well could be a lie. In fact, I would almost feel like it's them playing the same game maybe just out of being humorous, I guess, or, I don't see how that would benefit them. That's why I say it like that. But either way, it could be them lying in the same way, but they claim the U.S. government agreed to unfreeze Iranian funds. Now, it's just hilarious that Washington denies it, because think about how silly that would be. After all the big screeching claims from Trump, especially Obama gave him all that money. Well, no, if you're not a ridiculous person, you can look it up and realize that they gave back frozen assets they stole, excuse me, that they stole from Iran. Now, it doesn't change if you want to argue that still was giving money to terrorists. If you look at it that way, I think it's wildly obtuse and wrong, frankly, because they're not terrorists, but they're government like anybody else. The point, though, is that it's the same situation. And if he were to give them the funds, I guarantee you're going to see the next administration of the Democrats do the same thing. As Trump gave them terrorist money, because they look at it the same way. Right now, again, most Democrats are saying Iran war good, but Trump's doing it the wrong way. So it's just hilarious to me how this all comes around. And again, I think we're on the precipice of this. How long will it take for Americans, by and large, to just start to see through how ridiculous this is? Your government has always been lying to you as a whole, using the partisan game to keep you divided and fighting ourselves. Now, this is on the 11th. Trump says the U.S. has begun clearing out the Strait of Hormuz as Iran peace talks begin. So, turns out that looks like an absolute lie. And the reason that's important, obviously just being a lie is important, but is that it shows me the same thing I was talking about earlier. So you're at a point where, if I'm correct, you're in a weak position, but you've been screaming that you're just about to win, or that you already have, and you're just, I guess, giving them free things because you like them, or whatever that would add up to. And then in the midst of this, right? So, and they're already saying they're unreasonable demands. And so they're in the middle of this. His whole narrative has been Iran's strait's been closed all this time. It hasn't been, not fully. And then he goes, the U.S. has begun clearing out the Hormuz Strait. So the only way that would make sense, again, it didn't happen. If it had happened, what that would mean is that the U.S. government, the military rather, by themselves, were effectively going through what they claimed was the Iranian military that was shut down the Strait. At a time when Iran had not agreed to anything, when they were literally already saying the U.S. is pushing unreasonable demands. I'm just saying, take a second. Why would that make sense? There's not some secondary agreement because it's already ended. This didn't end up that way. I think you get it. Trump just lied about this. He just said this because I think he wants the Nick Sorter, Blind Peters of the world to come out and go, look at Trump so strong. He's controlling the Strait. That's what I think that is. That even while they're talking, he's just demonstrating that he's in power because he's it shows weakness when you have to lie about strength, obviously. But okay, so this starts on the 11th, saying clearing out the Strait. Then you get the argument later in the day. U.S. says 2 naval ships went through the Strait. Okay, but I thought you said there were mines everywhere. I thought you were telling us that they were blockaded and Iran was there blocking everybody. Why would they let your ships through? You see, the point is because they wanted to look like they just were too afraid. This shows you that some people made these arguments. Now, of course, at the time, maybe. If it had happened when I was reading it, I thought, well, there are one of two things. Either it shows you that maybe they're right. Maybe Iran is in a weaker position than they said they were. Or 2, that they just were unwilling to take that step because they knew it would end up hurting what they want, which I think is the end of this. And are willing to make it look like they're not in control. I think that's the situation. The U.S. and Israel will lie and bluster and literally push things to a degree that are farther than anybody would ever want to go to, just to not look stupid. Whereas I think Iran, many times over the years, has taken the illusion, it looks like they conceded when in reality they were the 12-day war. If you really understand the way that went down, Iran demonstrated to them that they blew up a lot of locations that were important, and it seemed they came out ahead in that. But Trump was the one that got to pretend like he pushed them back. I think Iran was okay with that. Now, of course, that's my opinion. So what you need to understand here on Saturday is they claim these went through, but it appears that didn't actually happen because Iran is denying that. Iran threatens, this came out in the middle of the day right after that, Iran threatens to attack U.S. destroyer near the Strait of Hormuz. So they've been there. And now my point is, at this time, you could look at the GPS, which we have, which you can access, which people can record and track, and this didn't seem to happen. Now it says on Saturday, and it says, quote, any U.S. military vessel crossing the Strait of Hormuz will be attacked. So that seems to kind of undermine the idea that they were able to go through. And it says, reads a warning from the directed at the U.S. Navy. Axios reporter Barack Ravid claimed on Saturday that U.S. warships had crossed the Strait earlier that morning without issue, citing a senior U.S. official. So now you've got Barack Ravid. He's the Axios guy that basically is a Zionist propagandist who's been caught lying about every step of the ceasefire. He's almost the sole report from Axios that's been framing it as they had peace talks and they're about to make a deal. And then it turned out to be false. Like 4 times. It's like Gaza with Blinken. It's the same point. So the U.S. officials claim that. Okay. So what seems to be the reality, I think that make sure I'm not jumping ahead too much. Making sure, I want to make sure I miss something on here. The bottom line, it's a really quick point. It's just that, so Iran denies this. Iran says that didn't happen. There were no ships that went through. From a GPS perspective, I can't verify that. It doesn't seem to be there any evidence for it. And on top of that, that right now, the way this ended up, Iran still has strategic control, and now Trump is threatening a military blockade. So we're going to pretend that they sent ships through, again, with mines and all the, there's too many obvious contradictory points. And on top of that, every statement before this, Trump has been lying about the ships, the negotiations, the deals, the control. I think they lied again. That's what they do. And of course, then you get people like this that Eric says, U.S. ships are clearing the Strait. Why? Because Trump said. President Trump promised he would do it. Now he's clearing them because Trump said it. But you know this. These people just repeat whatever they're told. There's a lot of people making fun of these guys right now. This Is You did this really great breakdown showing all the red lights and the statements. And it's hilarious. But I simply said, fantastic that you leave up these posts that turn out to be verifiable lies that you just parrot without due diligence. Makes it easier for the honest ones to see that you are shameless, what you shamelessly are. All this talk of closing the Strait, well, it's never actually been closed, just restricted for the, oh, actually, hold on. Oh yeah, I'll get it in a second. I think it's down here. Oh yeah, I've got it down here. Hold on, we'll come back to that. So the point with that was simply just that ultimately now they're militarily closing the Strait, which I already said, but we'll get to it in a second when I want to kind of wrap with that point as it overlaps with the bigger possible conversation. But so this is being reported on the 11th. To be clear, in case you're missing it the whole time, that we've ended up today with this being the reality, it already belies this. It already shows you that this wasn't the reality. So on the 10th, going yesterday before that post, Golubov says, 2 of the measures mutually agreed upon between the parties have yet to be implemented. This is before the 11th conversation. A ceasefire in Lebanon and the release of Iran's blocked assets. So what they were saying is we weren't even going to meet without these things. That was the red line. But they decided to let it happen anyway, which that I get why people might argue that shows weakness, but the way it ended up is the opposite to me. But I simply said, if you're just regurgitating what Trump yells out, that he's over here making all these things happen that didn't end up happening, then you're not aware of what's actually going on. And based on what Trump is yelling, maybe he doesn't either. But here on the 11th is what the Kabisi letter points out. The U.S.-Iran negotiations in Pakistan have hit a stalemate over the control of the Strait. So this is 11:46 a.m. Think of all the nonsense people were posting about how great and everything's going and Trump's winning and we're making the deal. And I said, I'm shocked. I tell you, I'm shocked because they were never intending to. They went with the false intention to pretend they were already ready. Basically, they went with a dishonest stance. They pretended they agreed to something they didn't, and they went there with the idea that they could just muscle in what they wanted or pretend something. I'm not sure. But so at the end of the day, this is 8:54 p.m. Here's what Vance had to say about how it didn't happen.
Precisely what have they rejected here? Can you help us understand it a little bit?
Well, I won't go into all the details because I don't want to negotiate in public after we negotiated for 21 hours in private.
That's such a stupid response. You know, easy would be to just list off the things that they did and did not agree to because they're lying about everything. In Iran's picture, their mindset, there was a 10-point plan they put forward that they argued they would give them. Then they show up and they don't agree to any of it. That's what happened. That's what Iran said. They unserious, not real demands, whatever the many different statements they put out. So the reality is that you never went there with the intention to agree to any of it. So none of it was agreed to. And I'll show you where Trump lies about that and says we agreed to everything except the nuclear plan. That's not even what he says here.
But the simple fact is that we need to see an affirmative commitment that they will not seek a nuclear weapon.
I mean, guys, this is hilariously stupid. That's why I make that point every time. So you need them to make a statement in line with what they've said 75 times, like in the last 6 months. We do not want a nuclear weapon. We are not seeking a nuclear weapon. So my point again, he's not claiming that we don't believe them. He's not saying I don't believe them. He's saying they refuse to say that. But we all know that's not true. That has to be a point that reaches people. If you're going to come out and tell us, well, they keep saying that, but we know it's not true, that might make sense. He's simply pretending they never said it. We all know they said this. The Pakistanis will tell you that. Oman foreign minister will tell you that. Again, that's why I had that link up there again. They already agreed to this before the 28th. And yet here we are, after all this bluster, right back in the same position. Because that's what they wanted, I argue.
And they will not seek the tools that would enable them to quickly achieve a nuclear weapon. That is.
So they're not allowed to have the same material, which again, already agreed to. 28, they said they get rid of those, they get rid of the tools, they get rid of the stockpile. You could take it. They know that. That's why they bombed them on the 28th.
The core goal of the President of the United States, and that's what we've tried to achieve through these negotiations.
Oh, the core goal was to stop the thing they were never doing, that they never wanted to do? Well, that's the lie that was told. That's what Israel's been pushing our entire lives. That's what everyone's coming to terms with. They lied about that. They lied our entire lives about 3 minutes, 2 weeks, 30 seconds away from a bomb. Not true. And again, like I just showed you, their actions make that clear. They wouldn't be doing what they're doing. If Iran was this nuclear monster waiting to push the button, then they wouldn't be pushing their lines right. They wouldn't be doing that right now. North Korea makes that case. In reverse, so does Libya.
Again, their nuclear program, such as it is, the enrichment facilities that they had before, they've been destroyed. But the simple question is, do we see a fundamental commitment of...
Oh, wait a minute now. So there's no imminent threat then. Because if all we're saying is we see that they just genuinely, there's a commitment to continuing their direction. Funny how quickly things change when you just are in a position where you got to lie about one thing, because that lie then contradicts what you said before. As I've said 1,000 times over the years, when they lie about everything, they have to contradict something when they lie. You can't turn every which way you turn. You're stepping on a previous lie. An imminent threat was the entire argument for why they had to do this. And so now you're telling us, well, we destroyed it all, which Trump said, by the way, if you listen to him then versus what he said now, obliterated. And that somehow that now it's, their intention was to eventually get back to that path, which wouldn't be a crime for anybody in the world. And that's why we had to bomb them, because it wasn't imminent. But that's not even the reality on top of everything, because that's not what the evidence shows. I don't know how you can't see this as a desperate position. I mean, if you're gonna lie about all this, why not just make up a lie that has much more meat to it? Because this is what Israel wants. This is what Israel has always said. And it's what they've always lied about.
Will for the Iranians not to develop a nuclear weapon, not just now, not just 2 years from now, but for the long term. We haven't seen that yet. We hope that we will.
You have, though. Many, many, many times. That's what's so stupid about this. And he knows that. Vance is not dumb. I mean, he's very aware. For example, here's Grok. How many times has Iran said they do not want, nor will they seek a nuclear bomb in just the last 5 years? Well, just the notable ones from 2021, 2026. The president, you could just go down the list, guys. There's articles for it. 2021, 2023, 2022, 2024, multiple times, 2025, 2026, literally in the middle of these conversations. So here's Grok. Here's your Elon platform that he alters and lies and tweaks all the time to lie to you, who's still telling you that they're wrong, that Vance is lying to you. Let's see what this says. Does Vance know this? Just for fun, see what it says. Yes, J.D. Vance is well aware that Iran repeated this public statement. Well, isn't that funny? Isn't that interesting? Maybe we should go post that beneath his post. But they don't care, guys. They don't care. Because the people that are supporting this, like we just showed you, are going to support it no matter what they do. See, like literally, they can censor the Epstein files, and the people that screamed about the Epstein files will be the ones that support them and go, what's the Epstein files? That's where we are. That's how sad this is. Let me do this real quick. I want to post that later. So, continuing. Again, just in case you need to see it, peace within reach as Iran agrees no nuclear stockpile. They agreed to no stockpile. They agreed to give up what they have, and they agreed to no nuclear direction. It's obvious. All written down. Here's a 20-minute interview where he walks you through it painfully, seeing as how this what's her name on Mace the Nation, like just can't even wrap her mind around it. He's like, no, they're going to give it up. She's like, so they're making bombs somewhere else? He's like, no, they're going to give it up. So they're making small bombs. It's like, it's just, what are you doing? Like, no, it's not there. And I mean, it's something like that. It's really hard to watch that she keeps doing it. And it's just insane. And this is why we all see this if we're not blind followers, guys. Now, here's even The Guardian. This is from Islam. It ended, I think late yesterday. Yeah, one day ago. So the end of the negotiations. Islamabad negotiations end without a deal as it happened. Now it says Vice President, I'll include this if you want to kind of go down the list of the things they said happened, but it is corporate media, so take it with a grain of salt. U.S. Vice President says Iran chose not to accept terms for a deal, including not to build nuclear weapons. Well, we know that's not true. And so the point, though, is that what was this is why he doesn't want to show you. Okay, show us what you're putting forward, Vance. If you're saying Iran chose not to accept your deal, what are you offering? Well, we already know that. It's not, it's basically cutting them off at the knees and acting like you're not going to then destroy them like you did with every other country that you deal with. So here's what Patrick Henningsen adds on the 12th. Goldvinder posts breaking ceasefire updates. It says, this is from Iran. We are disappointed with how the U.S. behaved. Netanyahu's call to Vance during the meeting. The U.S. vice president got a direct call from the president of the United States, Netanyahu, and told him what to do. The U.S. tried to achieve at the negotiating table what it could not achieve through war. We came here with good faith. The press conference by Vance before he left Pakistan was unnecessary. We are committed and prepared to safeguard our nation's interest and sovereignty. Guys, we should question and doubt what they say, like any government. But if you just continue to pay attention, they're showing themselves to be what they claim to be right now. And the U.S. government is showing itself to be what I've always told you it was. It couldn't be more clear than I've ever seen it today. And Patrick says, Netanyahu hijacked negotiations midstream, giving orders to J.D. Vance, which led to a predictable failure, which is what Israel wanted. That's his opinion, but I agree. Now, here's what Alex Jones says. Now, by the way, there's a whole thing that I'm probably going to get into at some point. I promised you, I told you, I'm telling you right now, again, it may not be as clear right now to some, he will fall back around. Unless the writing on the wall is that Trump is going to be turned on by everybody and he follows suit. If Trump maintains a major support in the Republican Party and MAGA support, this man will turn to support him. And I argue he's already kind of doing that in some ways. But there's this whole battle axe thing that I think was wildly orchestrated. And it's just kind of weird, the whole thing. But on that show, he was like, we're fighting for Trump forever. And then like that night or like right afterward, Trump posts that. In fact, what's weird is Trump posts that Truth Social about these guys, like criticizing the hell out of all of them before technically he put that post out. But I mean, the show could have been live technically before that. I'm not sure. But either way, he got attacked by him. And now he comes out saying, I'm turned on Trump forever. I don't believe it. Just want to point that out. I don't. These are fair weather people, in my opinion. But he says, J.D. Vance just said the war is back on. So maybe now J.D. Vance is the guy. Don't miss the 4 flashing lights, 4 red lights. That's how you know it's real. That's the sign that it's an important story. 3 lights, maybe you could ignore. 4 lights, whew, it's good, big time stuff. I'm obviously making fun of him. The point here, guys, is that J.D. Vance might be the new guy to support. But either way, the war is good, I guess, and we're back on.
Well, the war is back on with Iran, like I said it would happen 3 days ago. J.D. Vance just announced from Europe.
Yeah, you're very insightful that the war that they've always driven for, that they're all clearly fighting for, that everyone without, anyone other than blind partisan followers have always all been telling you that was going to happen. But now he knows Alex Jones is always right. You mean he's right about the thing he was wrong about for 100, for a year. He was wrong for a year about this guy. He got this guy in power. But now in the last second, the final hour, he turns around and goes, Iran's happening. We know it. And they all go, Alex was right. It's sad. At the very least, it's nice to see that most people seem to be seeing through it. But there's that core blind follower, just like with partisanship, that do apply to it.
That the peace deal with Iran has fallen through. This will be really bad for Iran. Israel is so happy. BlackRock is so happy right now.
Yeah, BlackRock, who was tied right to Trump's hip that you supported the entire time, even though we all knew it was there. I mean, you just can't take this seriously. You either chose to ignore all the things that we were all screaming about, which you did, or you didn't know they were there. And that's incredible how you can even have this job and not know that. So it was a choice, guys. And so whatever it is, now it's a choice. His calculus has changed because now he's an opportunist who now sees that most people who support him want, it's a split in the line. It seems like half his audience eats him alive for saying anything bad about Trump. At the same time, the honest ones, which I care about, that's it. Only people that want honest reporting are like, he's wrong. We can see it. And now he's stuck.
The Strait of Hormuz is going to stay closed.
Wasn't closed in the first place, bud.
The recovery is going to fail, and they're going to get what they want. This is COVID 2.0.
Oh, see, he's just he's glomming onto, that's Catherine's argument. He just scoops up what people say. It's Bill Cooper all over again. This guy just scoops up what people do. But the bottom line, guys, it's back on. It's good. And like I told you, we're on war. I mean, welcome to the damn conversation, Alex Jones. You know what I mean? And even that, he's just basically gleaning things from the reality is this was always obvious from day one. And it's not to say that I knew for a fact where it'd end up because there's multifaceted things. There's different agendas at play. Any other random country could have jumped up and done something that caused things to shift. But at the end of the day, it was clear. He's just barely starting to give you a fraction of what we've always been telling you. The war is back on. Bad for Iran. This guy, he's the same person. It just didn't really change. Now, today, forward to end with an important point about this, the Strait and the potential future. AP, Trump threatens Strait of Hormuz blockade after U.S.-Iran ceasefire talks end without agreement. Now, this is super important. That's why I gave you that whole starting point. Because if we know it wasn't closed. It's not closed now. It wasn't closed before. It's been restricted, yes. But I'm very much of the mind with the whole lie of the minds and everything, which we'll get more into in a second, that the effort was to scare people. Like literally to scare people away. Like I think U.S. and Israel were telling people that there were things they would be exploded by Iran's secret terrorists and whatever. Or just coercing them with their own influence and money and, the idea of sanctions and different financial mechanisms. Tariffs, whatever else. I mean, they've clearly been using these things for illegitimate reasons. My point would be to keep people from going through to affect the trade, either for the larger agenda or just to get the world to think Iran's doing it to everybody. And so here we are at a point where they never really did shut it down. In fact, they took a path that I think confounded Israel and the United States because they would never do it, which is they only really focused on them and they let everybody else go through. And then many of them didn't, again, because of what I just said. So now you effectively have Trump and his team coming around and doing the thing that they say they want to stop. Effectively, now it hasn't happened as far as I can tell, claiming they want to start a military blockade where they will keep it shut to everybody unless Iran stops what they're doing. So you're the one doing what you claim they did. So it's so funny. This is such a perfect little microcosm of what they always do. You're the one. Accuse them of that which you are guilty. They never did it, but now you do it and claim you did it to stop them from doing something they never did in the first place. It's hilarious if it wasn't so terrifying. April 12th. Donald Trump on Sunday said the U.S. Navy would immediately, as far as I can tell, it hasn't started. Please let me know if you see anything. I mean, we can even just go back to this real quick since we just had a second. Let's go to warships. That'll give us the clear example. Okay, so here's what we got. One U.S. ship, and what is that? It's tiny on my screen. Is that Pakistan? I can't tell. Let me know in the chat if you can see what that is. And then it doesn't zoom in for some reason when you zoom. And then just so clear, that is right now on the UAE territorial waters. Or, I mean, very close. Maybe Oman. It's hard to tell. But not on the other side. And you can see that's this gray line. So technically, they're not in Iran's territorial waters. So arguably, right there, if based on what the U.S. has been doing and Israel's been doing, why wouldn't Iran just bomb those ships? I'm not saying they should. I hope they don't. My point, though, is that we'll get to more in a second. Again, they've been bombing things that we'll get back to the one in Sri Lanka. They literally bombed a ship in the middle of a training exercise based on some legitimate purpose. So it's just every day you see examples that the belligerent element here is Israel and the United States. It's clear. Now, we'll come back to this. But he said immediately begin the blockade of ships entering or leaving the Strait. Oh, you know what's funny, but I'm actually mad I didn't mention this in the beginning because it's very relevant, but you'll be blown away by this part now. Piracy. Not just for what you see right here, but in regard to anybody they claim paid a toll. An illegitimate toll. So you paid a toll to get through the Strait that Iran was asking for, which every other Strait canal I know of in the world does. And now you're going to seek out people who paid a toll and stop them? Yeah, that's what Trump is saying. Again, I find this really hard to believe that he's even going to functionally make this happen. But it says, after the ceasefire talks ended without an agreement. or even next diplomatic steps in sight. Clearly, I'd be surprised if they meet again. I mean, it's insane. A U.S. blockade could, other than it does make Iran continue to look like the one seeking, because that is the reality, I think, an end to this. That if they continue to meet with them and eventually, and just hold their ground and eventually get what they ultimately asked for, that's a win for them, even if Trump continues to play the narrative game. So I argue that is their benefit for them to keep going to the table if they can do it in a way where they won't be assassinated. It's just so crazy how we all seem to know it. A U.S. blockade could further rattle global energy markets. Right. So Trump's blockade would do the same thing he says trying to stop, and prices for oil, natural gas, related products. It was not immediately clear how it might be carried out, but Trump told Fox News the goal was to ensure all ships could transit, and it says, quote, "It's going to be all or none." And that's the way it is. So my mind is, if he would have just said, we're going to make sure all ships transit, well, I would have been like, okay, that's more about the military kind of guidance, which nobody supported because they were worried Iran would bomb them, because they might, based on the military circumstances, and they would have legal targets to do. So nobody seemed to go on board. But then he went on to say it's going to be all or none. So the only way you take that is if Iran maintains its stance, I guess that means none. And if they stop, well, then that means they'll militarily let people go through. So effectively, three things: gaining control over the Strait militarily for the U.S. government, which they will then never let go of. Two, I just lost the one. Basically, I promise you, this is the way it's going to go. If that happens, that they'll start asking for tolls and they'll start making money on the exchange, which same thing in reverse. Damn it, there's one other thing I just lost. But either way, the end of the day point for me is that you're now effectively creating the blockade that you claimed you were trying to stop. Right? So you now have that position. Now, I just find that really hard to believe. Like I said, that's a crazy step. And I don't think even other countries will allow that, but that's what he's now saying. And honestly, it comes back to one main thing for Trump, I think: control. That's it. Doesn't matter the outcome, the consequences for U.S. interest. He just can't be the one seen as the one losing. That's how petty I think this person is. But there are lines for him, I think. Trump said he has instructed our Navy to seek and interdict every vessel in international waters. Why do they think they have the right to do that? Because you understand, they do not. But that doesn't stop them anywhere else, guys. Doesn't stop Israel, doesn't stop the U.S. government. But he says, we're going to interdict. Intercept, but here's the actual, it just says an authoritative prohibition. So they're going to hunt them down, stop them, essentially, is what they're saying, even though they've already passed through the Strait. So it's saying we're going to seek and interdict every vessel in international waters anywhere in the world, apparently, that has paid a toll to Iran. A toll, by the way, that's only here because of what you started. And it says no one who pays an illegal toll. Well, wait a minute. Why would it be illegal for them? It's illegal for what you claim for Iran to ask for it. Why is it somehow being turned into their crime for being like, by your argument, that's Iran extorting them. So you're now blaming the victim, essentially? This is insane to me. I think this is about control. It's about him making himself look powerful. It says no one who pays an illegal toll will have safe passage on the high seas. It's just ridiculous. They're childish, they're juvenile, and they're dangerous and powerful and pirates, which is terrifying. That they're this juvenile and they're this powerful. Other nations would be involved in the blockade, he said, but not name them, because that means they're not. Watch. Because it's insane, guys. This is an insane step. And I'm arguing you're probably going to get some of the more belligerent ones to support it, but I doubt it's going to be a bunch of them involved. Freedom of peaceful navigation is a basic principle of international maritime trade, but Iran has asserted control of the Strait. Nobody, see, this is what's so funny about this. Again, for the 100th time, there was no restriction before you started the illegal war. And as Trump and Israel will scream about literally everything, well, wartime changes everything. But the point is that freedom of navigation is completely hindered all over the world by the leading powers in the world. But it only matters when Iran bad guy, because that's just how silly this all is. During the talks, the U.S., and to be clear, I do agree, the freedom of movement is important. But understand that what they're using it to, they're basically accusing them of doing something they created when they do it all the time around the world. That's the point. During the talks, the U.S. military said 2 destroyers had transited the Strait ahead of the mine clearing work, a first since the war began. Iran denied that, which you already know. Trump stressed that Tehran, now again, just like the last time, there's no evidence of this that I can find. And if there were mines that they had to move, which we'll get into next, all this different stuff, these lies put together or these statements lined up next to each other, they just don't connect. You can see that they're inconsistent. And he says Trump stressed that Tehran's nuclear ambitions were at the core of the failure to end the war, even though it's not what they're doing. And the U.S. was ready to, quote, finish up Iran at the appropriate moment. You see my point? Like, so you're literally pretending you're negotiating, but you're like, but, we're ready to just annihilate them as soon as we can because he's a child. In comments to Fox News, he again threatened to strike civilian infrastructure. Nowhere in the world is that considered anything but a war crime, guys, and said he was fine with his widely criticized threat shortly before the ceasefire that a whole civilization would die. Right. Israel's bombing civilian infrastructure all over the place. Lebanon, right now. And even they just told you Lebanon was not part of this, even though 30 seconds ago they stressed that they were the same conversation because now they want to pretend like it's not part of the ceasefire. Okay, fine. You told us it's not part of this war. Well, guess what? Netanyahu just committed war crimes by bombing those bridges in Lebanon. But nobody cares because they do it everywhere. Neither indicated that this is face-to-face talks, ceasefire, didn't happen. Neither indicated what will happen after this alleged 14-day ceasefire. The guys is not real. Israel's been bombing Lebanon every day. Israel's been bombing Iran throughout this process. They've been doing all sorts of operations in Gaza as well. There's no ceasefire. It's just like every other one. Israel can do it at once. They're apparently still in a ceasefire in Gaza and Lebanon. I'm not joking. AP will be like, they've killed 700 as the ceasefire continues. It's ridiculous. Apparently, only thing that can stop a ceasefire is when the adversaries of Israel allegedly shoot somebody. Neither indicated what will happen after 14 days, apparently on April 22nd. Pakistani mediators urged all parties to maintain it, I guess, even though they're not right now. Each side said their positions were clear and blamed the other. We need to see affirmative commitment. It says that they will not seek nuclear weapons. Same old thing. And it says the tools that will, you heard him. That's exactly what Vance just said. Iran's parliament speaker, Ghalibaf, who led Iran's side, said it was time for the United States, quote, to decide whether it can gain our trust or not. Iranian officials earlier said talks fell apart over 2 or 3 key issues, blaming what they called U.S. overreach. So if there was agreement, I'm willing to bet you anything that it's because they pretended there were things that they were going to give them that they had no intention of giving them. Many of the 10 things on that list that they pretended none of them were okay when Trump yelled out loud. Then they sit down, and if the claim was they did agree on some, then that means they gave them things they knew they weren't going to follow through with. That's my opinion. Now, the ones they said they weren't driving on probably didn't even exist. Probably had them telling them that they had to do something they knew they wouldn't agree to. Then Trump comes up and goes, they refuse to not seek nuclear weapons. We know that's not the reality. So overreach and lies seem to be the game for them. Pakistani foreign minister said his country will try to facilitate a new dialogue in the coming days. Iran said it was open to continuing dialogue. If that ends up happening, I think it's because of what I said. They know they've got the upper hand, and they're willing to continue to go there as long as they're not a threat, like in a position of threat. Continuing, it says, Tehran has long denied seeking nuclear weapons, but insisted on its right to a civilian nuclear program. But remember, guys, this is what's so important. As of right now, that's still their stance, is at least what they're saying. And of course, they could be lying. That before this, on the 28th, they agreed to give it all up. They agreed to give up their civilian nuclear program, to give up their enrichment entirely. So if that's what they wanted, they had that on the 28th, and Trump and Israel bombed them. So right now, for him to say that's their red line, well, you had it and you gave it up. They don't want it. That's the point to make right there. They're not actually seeking that. They're lying about it from the beginning. And it says but so now they're saying, well, they've changed the situation. We're demanding the control of the Strait, a toll on the Strait, paying us back for what you did, and back to the main point of the civilian nuclear program, which, by the way, was also completely maintained and controlled during the JCPOA that Trump also violated. That's what it says right there. The landmark nuclear deal with Iran, which Trump later pulled out of, took well over a year of negotiations. And this one, we get, I guess, one day, and it blows up because they never intended to make a deal. The Iranian diplomatic official, speaking on condition of anonymity because of the sensitivity, denied the negotiations had failed over Iran's nuclear ambitions. Of course, because it's not true. I mean, understand, I'm not ever speaking to what like I said, is it maybe they've got a secret nuclear bomb somewhere? I don't know. Anything's possible. The evidence doesn't back that up. They've denied it. Our own U.S. intelligence has said it's not true. The International Atomic Energy Agency has said it's not true. I mean, there's not even another player in the conversation that even exists. Those are the groups that the U.S. would tell you to look to in other circumstances. So the point is that the evidence shows it's not there. And then they stand up and say, we do not want it. We are not seeking it. We never will. So when they come up and say they refuse that, they're obviously lying, right? So he comes up and just says, look, that's not what's on the table. That wasn't the issue. And there are other mediators that have backed this up. He says, quote, Iran is not seeking to acquire nuclear weapons, but it has the right to nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. Quote, we have never sought war, he says. But if they try to win what they failed to win in the battlefield through talks, that's absolutely unacceptable. It's also pretty embarrassing. Elsewhere in the region, reported airstrikes calmed over the past day, except in Lebanon. But guys, calmed in the last day. They're bombing in Iran and everywhere else. How are we even pretending like that's not obviously a violation? Under Lebanon, Iran's 10-point proposal for the ceasefire talks for a guaranteed end of the war, including the end of the fighting against Iran's regional allies, explicitly calling for a halt to their strikes on Lebanon. If you don't remember this was proven. I said it earlier. They agreed to this. It's another example for anybody honestly paying attention, showing you that Israel let's just say Trump and Rubio are willing to stand up and lie to your face, knowing that you can prove they're lying to you. They must know that shows you that they're willing to lie to you, Americans, for Israel's agenda. To me, it screams that they're not in control. Now, it says Israel has said the ceasefire did not apply to Lebanon. We all know it did. Iran and Pakistan said it did. Pakistan is an independent mediator. In fact, Pakistan is largely on the side of them, and they're backing up Iran. And it says negotiations between Israel and Lebanon are expected to begin Tuesday. I think this is absurd, quite frankly, after Israel's surprise announcement, right? So they carry out one of the biggest bombardments of three very, very civilian, very packed locations, Beirut, one of them, in Lebanon, in one of the largest in history, as they said they were going to ceasefire. Then Trump goes, we'll rein in Israel, like I told you, and this is what you get. Meanwhile, they're still bombing Lebanon, by the way, in case you missed that. That's how stupid this is. But we're going to meet for talks. In the meantime, we're going to keep breaking the rules. That's how dumb it is. But you realize they're not meeting with Hezbollah, guys. They're meeting with Lebanon. They're meeting with the government of Lebanon, which is basically a vassal state of the U.S. and Israel. So this is just a show, guys. I'm telling you. And this is what, look to people that know what they're talking about. The day that Iran's ceasefire deal was announced, Israel pounded Beirut with airstrikes, killing more than 300 people in the deadliest day in Lebanon since the war began. Though Israel's strikes have calmed in Beirut, its attacks in southern Lebanon have intensified along the ground invasion. They're literally invading Lebanon. It renewed out. I mean, think about how is it possible that they're the only group in the world, you already know the answer to this, that can literally invade a country and bomb civilian locations in broad daylight and nobody even reports about it? Really? There's not some major report. There's not major action happening. How is that possible? Lebanon's state-run national news agency reported 6 people were killed Sunday, that's today, ladies and gentlemen, by a strike in the Mar village near the coastal city of Tyre. Just casual, coastal city bombed, killing 6 people for no reason in the middle of a civilian area during a ceasefire. Just another day for Israel. Now here is, Mr. Propagandist Eric Dougherty saying just now, probably reported yesterday or 3 years ago for all we know, hashtag just now, breaking news, red light flashing. Iran is likely stunned. I'm kidding, by the way. It is new. I'm just making fun of the fact they do that. Iran is likely stunned that President Trump really did it. He's blockading the Strait. Oh, is he? Hold on a second. Let me see. Wait, it doesn't really look like that's happening, though, Eric. Let's refresh this real quick. Let's go to all ships. Look at that blockade. It's almost like there's nothing blockading anything. It's almost like they're all just flowing through the strait. It's almost like Eric doesn't know what he's talking about, or that he just blindly repeats whatever Trump yells out, which is what we're talking about. Time and again, we realize that Trump stands on business. Sure. I'm telling you, that whatever the narrative is, even if it's not something Trump said, but something the communities kind of float, this guy, all of them, the red light, holy crap guys. That's what they are. They just repeat the thing and yell it. And everyone, here's what another propagandist for Fox News, broadcasting out of Tel Aviv, wants you to think about what's going on. And this is them arguing about the blockade conversation.
We've got Trey Yinks with us now from Tel Aviv. So Trey, what can you tell us about this Truth Social post that Trump just posted?
Look, this is a significant announcement.
Okay, so just to make it clear, Eric literally posted this by saying he's blocked the Strait. And links to a
President
video
Trump and
where the report is, let's talk about the post he just put up, where he says he's going to do that. I mean, this is his own post. Like they don't care. I mean, it's coming out pretty much everywhere right now. I think Gunther Eagleman just got caught selling reposts for hundreds of dollars to people that would pay him money. I mean, these are grifters. And I don't mean everybody. There's plenty of people that believe this stuff and actually do it on their own account. But there are genuine grifters and like profiteers and opportunists just flooding any partisan game, but especially the one in power. But just don't think about that. Like clearly this is, well, let's talk about what might happen. He reports it as absolute. But here's what they have to say about the potential blockade of the Strait. You know, the very thing that Trump's claimed the entire effort is to stop. I don't know why we can't laugh about how stupid that is.
once again, an indication that the United States holds the cards here. The president
there
from Tel Aviv. So Trey, what can you tell us about this?
Where you get that classic sociopathic stare, right? Just like a lot of these Zionists that we talk to.
This Truth Social post that Trump just posted.
Look, this is a significant announcement by President Trump, and once again, an indication that the United States holds the cards here.
Right, the indication. So Trump saying things on Truth Social clearly shows he's in control. Yes, we get it. That's what you want us to think. We get that's why those posts are put there, even though most of them are unhinged and completely disconnected from reality, or whatever it is. But it shows you he's completely in control of everything that he wants you to think he's in control of. Thanks, Trey.
The president is the decision maker,
Clearly.
even as it relates to the Strait of Hormuz.
Why would you even need to say that? Isn't that a funny thing? Actually, I didn't think about that before. Well, he's the president. I'm pretty sure the president is the decision maker, right, Trey? So are you saying that to like bolster an opinion that we might be garnering that, that maybe he's not the one making the decision? Yes, quite obviously. You wouldn't need to reiterate that the person in power is the one in power unless you're wondering whether he's the one in power. Perfect.
Announcement by President Trump, and once again, an indication that the United States holds the cards here. The president is the decision maker, even as it relates to the Strait of Hormuz. And we heard just yesterday as these two Navy destroyers passed through the Strait.
Not that I can tell, but yeah, heard, because that's what U.S. sources said, that Iran denied, that the evidence doesn't back up because there's GPS.
Threats from the Iranians claiming that they would fire on these vessels. And the president is very clear here in his post on Truth Social. This will not be tolerated. Threats or strikes against U.S. forces.
Yeah, we won't be tolerated. You're not allowed to attack U.S. forces in the midst of a war we started. Are we just pretending like that's not where we are? Like, think about this, that you're in this point where you claim we're in some kind of limbo ceasefire before talks that already failed, that you already violated before you got there. And yet somehow if they dare strike us while you're in the war with them, they're doing what? Breaking the law? Or that you're just going, we'll do something back. Well, guess what? You're in a war. Of course you will. It's nonsense, guys. This is all theater. And I don't mean theater in the sense that it won't lead to action, but it's all performative. It's for you. It's for making you think certain things, making you think he's in control, making you think he's dictating. It seems ridiculous to me. And it's actually false in most cases.
Or vessels in the region will have consequences. And so once again, the president is showing who is in charge, not just at the negotiating table, but on the battlefield. And we talk about the Iranian Navy and what is left of it. There was a systematic campaign by the United States and Israel over the past 40 days when Operation Epic Fury was ongoing that showed the Iranian Navy had no way to defend its own vessels, whether it was the mine-laying vessels or even these larger ships. Most of them are at the bottom of the sea.
Well, again, as Robert argues that that's not the case, but you can question that like we should. They posted in January that they had tunnels full of ships. I guess we'll find out soon enough, won't we? But what's interesting, hold on, was it again?
That showed the Iranian Navy had no way to defend its own vessels.
Yeah. Well, again, the point is that generally speaking, they continue to hammer this point home, but most analysts argue that was kind of the given. And that's why Iran was prepared for that. So they can keep hammering away that those two things happening mean we won already, but it's not the truth. Everyone can see that. It's not ending, and you're not in a position of power. So, at the very least, how this goes shows that you're not really the one holding the cards. They can keep yelling that all they want.
Whether it was the mine-laying vessels or even these larger ships, Most of them are at the bottom of the sea at this point, and that is a result of the heavy U.S. strikes that were ordered by President Trump and executed by U.S. Central Command. And so with this decision to order a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, the president is once again showing the Iranians if they are unwilling to make concessions at the negotiating table, the president will force them into those concessions on the battlefield.
I mean, what it's absurdly disconnected. That's not even anywhere connected to reality. Repeatedly, it's been shown to be the opposite. I mean, in fact, it's the exact opposite, that you failed to achieve on the battlefield, so now you're demanding things in negotiations. But like, let me ask you this. Why does it, in any sense, whether it's especially with Trump and who we know he is and what he's always claimed, but for anybody really, in a military negotiation, why would it be that we go to the table to try to negotiate for the things that will then just go and steal from you militarily? It's usually the other way around. But either way, I mean, it's any number of circumstances that could cause it to go either way. My point is that just in this last back and forth, Trump has been shown to be lying repeatedly. And so the idea that his statement on Truth Social implies any of this is kind of sad, right? But this is what these people do. They just bolster the ideas. And you realize they've done this same little tap dance with everything he's done so far. More than that. I think 80% of the things he's put forward have been flatly false. And they just do the same thing. They go and do it again.
And of course, take away all the money that they're making by letting those ships, the ships that they're letting that have paid the toll pass through. In his Truth Social, he writes that I have also instructed our Navy to seek and interdict every vessel in international waters that has paid a toll to Iran. No one who pays an illegal toll will have safe passage on the high seas.
Yeah, terrorism, piracy.
So that's going to be controversial with a Chinese or Pakistani flagged,
or just international law. If you guys weren't complete partisan morons.
Ship that Iran has allowed through. What's the reaction in the international community going to be to that?
Look, there may be some.
I don't know why Trey's opinion is even in matters right on this. He's not an international. He's a Zionist propagandist. Pretty sure he's, why he has insight on this conversation. Who knows? But it's because I think they want you to think certain things, and that's why he's there.
Some people who are critical of President Trump, but the president rightly pointed out that these countries did not participate in helping to open the Strait of Hormuz.
Oh, so I'm going to ignore the question entirely and just give you his narrative talking points on why NATO sucks. Great job, propagandist.
During Operation Epic Fury. Sure. We've heard a lot of comments from European officials who say that the president should make different decisions, or that they're trying to put pressure on the operation. The reality is you have countries like France, for example, who have come out in opposition of what the president is saying, but they're not helping to open the Strait of Hormuz.
It's not closed. See, that's why that point's important, because if they're not involved, it's not closed to them. And that's why, if you actually are honest about this, but the entirety of mainstream apparatus, mainstream alternative media, and like the, influencer-wise, zillions of, millions and millions and millions of follower influence hides the reality of anybody honestly going, but it's not though. But it's not. Look, it's staggering.
But they benefit when it is open. And so it raises these important questions about if countries around the world who benefit from the Strait being open are going to participate in securing the Strait. And
he's making this case for you. There's no legality in any of that. You're basically just saying that we're going to punish anybody that doesn't do what we want in the circumstance. That's piracy. That's terrorism. That's authoritarianism. That's whatever you want to call it. That's not what we pretend they're fighting for. It's what they're actually fighting for over your life and everybody else's. Control, power. It's wild. And if these were real journalists that had any understanding of the legalities of any of the things we're talking about, that would be talked about right there. That would be criticized right there. But you're never going to see that unless it's allowed, unless it's already a kind of release valve moment of when you're supposed to go, yep, the thing is bad. Yeah, the Epstein, yeah, now it's bad after we've been screaming it for 2 years. Painful. So as James Tate points out, in regard to the negotiations themselves, the Logan Act is a United States federal law that criminalizes the negotiations of a dispute between the United States and a foreign government by an unauthorized American citizen. Well, Jared Kushner has no security clearance, he has provided no financial disclosures, he's hopelessly conflicted financially, if not in other ways too, is not Senate confirmed, and doesn't report to anyone subject to congressional oversight, diplomatic mercenary. Right. But you see, nothing applies to these people right now. And if you think the Democrats are up in arms to go after them, even using lies, then this would be buried by now. And I shouldn't, that's the wrong way, the wrong term. This would be exploded. It would be this would be everywhere. Or any number of 1,000 different examples. There are very clear crimes. Like I said, the ethics pledges that should have been a low-hanging fruit effort for the Democrats if they really wanted to go after his administration. They do not. As a whole of government sense, it has to be clear by now. This is insane to me. It's just never been more clear. And this is like the argument of whatever government it is. This is obvious that a government has influenced, if not taken control over policy of this country. The game that somehow returned, like, you hate Jewish people, it's just a cartoon. Think about that statement, what we're talking about. Sure, it's possible that somebody out there overlaps with disgusting opinions and also recognizes the truth, but the idea that you can ever claim that watching what we're seeing is somehow a specific hatred for one religion, it's mind-blowing to me, but that's why it's not working anymore. As Patrick says, there was no ceasefire. I agree. When you see these two dodgy grifters, shameless Israeli assets lurking about peace negotiations, it's a surefire signal that a massive attack is being planned by Israel and Trump. As well as the fact, and this is really important, this is not the first time. They've been doing, Witkoff and Kushner, they don't know what they're talking about when it comes to these nuclear conversations. Patrick says, okay, so Iran sent 4 PhDs to the negotiating table in Islamabad just recently, the 11th. While the U.S. had sent a shady real estate developer from Long Island and the president's son-in-law, both now widely regarded as unregistered Israeli agents, a 41-year-old tech bro, and 1 general. Not to mention, Iran's deputy foreign minister had held 3 graduate degrees, and its foreign minister had a PhD from the University of Kent. Like, think about that. And this is again, Vance going, he probably can't read English. Take a look at the overlap of these people. Talk about a meritocracy. And I'm not even saying that about Iran. I'm saying the lack of it in the United States. But it says a lot about how serious the U.S. are to anything productive coming out of this exchange, let alone serious, period. My point, though, guys, they never had any intention to see this go anywhere other than where it's going right now. As Freddie points out, Freddie Pontone, it took 5 years of diplomatic talks and negotiations for the 4 negotiating parties in the Vietnam War to secure a peace treaty. Israel's agents, Witkoff and Kushner, sabotaged this in 1 day. It's their reason, deter, justification for starting the war. Now, I will add, though, that the Vietnam War was very similar. It was a dragged-out war that administration after administration let linger. So I argue that's probably one of the reasons that the negotiations kind of strung out. But it's hard to say. It's 5 years, so it would have overlapped at least one. So I argue that probably played a factor. But either way, things like this do take time. They never intended to go further, I argue. And as Syed Mohammed Marandi points out, their objective was no deal. They don't work for the United States. Now, here's what Rubio had to say. I'll read what I said first because it's just sad, guys. I mean, how long have we been covering this? If this is the best they can do, you need to see who these people are by now. Actually, I'll play it first. You guys, I've talked about this many times.
Well, he's an expert in genocide. They're experts in that because, they sponsor terrorism all over the world.
Iran. Just in case you know, he's talking about Iran again.
Okay. Well, he's an expert in genocide. They're experts in that because, they sponsor terrorism all over the world. And they've killed thousands and thousands of people.
Thousands and thousands. Think about the goal of saying that. I'm willing to bet you could personally tie Rubio to way more than that. The U.S. government, and I mean just through actions he's taken while in government and personally. You take the government's position of the United States, for crying out loud, thousands? You could talk about what they did to people in this country with policy actions. You could talk about any one bomb they threw around the world. And this is what you're criticizing, and realize that most of what he's pointing to, we just went over, are Hezbollah, Houthis, Hamas, the one Israel also funds. The reality that is obviously not Iran in the sense of what they're claiming, or the ones that were killed while the U.S. people that were killed while the U.S. government was illegally invading Iraq. This is the best they can do. You understand? Like, why would you just lie? Why wouldn't you just make up a bigger number at this point? I don't know. Because this is a lie too, by the way.
Look at the Middle East.
I said that wrong. They are lying, to make that clear. Why don't they just lie better is what I should have said.
Look at the Middle East, guys. Every problem in the Middle East tracks back to Iran. Hezbollah, Iran. Shia militias that are destroying and threatening Iraq, Iran.
Incorrect.
Hamas, Iran.
Incorrect.
The Houthis, Iran.
I mean, you realize that some of these aren't even the same ideological overlap, guys. It just doesn't even matter. The facts don't matter to these people.
Assad when he was in Syria, Iran.
Oh, apparently Assad too.
The only kind, the way, I mean, everywhere you turn, they're behind all of it.
But and the good thing is we now have a proven Al Qaeda terrorist running the country, so we're safe now. Good thing we got that guy out of there that allowed Christians to live in the country. You know, dangerous. That was the bad guy. Now we've got the Al Qaeda terrorist that we had a $10 million bounty on, who's killing ethnic cleansing and working with Israel. But that's what winning looks like.
They are a destabilizing, dangerous, evil force that had to be dealt with. They have to be weakened.
Okay, what are they destabilizing? Anybody want to chime in? What are they destabilizing? What country are they occupying? Well, I mean, we don't have to do the same thing. You all know this, but somebody out there might need to hear it. You know what I mean? Like the insanity of claiming this I'll just again read what I said. This is the best they could do. Just the same old lies and misrepresentations. These are desperate men. Now compare the lies as if they're true, right? So pretend what he said was 100% verifiable to only what Israel and the U.S. governments have admitted, respectively, to doing in the world. Now, usually I just say what you can prove, right? But let's just say admitted. Take just what the U.S. government has grudgingly admitted about what it's done over the years, usually 20 years, 30 years. They have those things, oh, yeah, the genocide of Native Americans, we apologize. Or, you know, the thing, oh, we look back, we apologize. Fine. They don't care. But let's just take what we can prove, what they've admitted. And you compare just one of these large events to what they claim Iran is doing, as if it was true. It's not. And it doesn't even compare. And of course, I add the obvious. Then include the ongoing genocide that they're committing as we type this, and just becomes an insult to your intelligence. You're committing a genocide in Gaza, and you're letting them invade and bomb Lebanon. They're killing civilians as we speak, but you're going to gripe about things that aren't even connected to Iran. This is the best they can do. And this is Donald Trump post, True Social post. It's just desperation, guys. And again, this is what Israel's accounts are posting. If negotiations fail in the coming hours, there's no guarantee that we won't bomb the plane when they fly home. And as he said, who are the terrorists here? As Netanyahu came right out and said yesterday, toward middle of the day, Israel under my leadership will continue to fight Iran's terror. They're not even trying to hide the fact that they're not saying this is the case, guys. They're in control. They're going to keep doing what they're going to do. Trump is just doing his own little thing to spin out theater or otherwise, or maybe he's just finally realizing that it's not what who knows. At the end of the day, Israel is telling you, we are going to keep going. Why are they even, this is 12 p.m. in the middle of their supposed negotiations. Did anybody believe this was going to stop? They never planned on it stopping. Ryan Rosbiani said, and this is posted on the 11th as well, Netanyahu did a whole post about, look at that. His plans. Everything we've been telling you, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Egypt, Yemen, all lined up in red. This is the part of the Greater Israel Project. Iran should leave negotiations now, Ryan says. Netanyahu exposed his plan and Trump keeps moving weapons to the Middle East. I mean, just like that's one thing you should consider. Like every other time in Saudi Arabia with the Houthis, and every time they use the idea of negotiations to rebuild and they're on their back foot, like we can see. They overextended their weapons. Clearly, that's what the evidence shows. And so you could argue that right now they're just desperately trying to build themselves back up. Makes sense. Meanwhile, you've got Smotrich on the 9th openly talking about the Greater Israel Project like they do all the time, by the way, but the media lies about it, calls you racist. And it says Smotrich officially announces the start of implementing the Greater Israel Vision, referring to the annexation of Syria, Lebanon, Gaza Strip. Like I've said, they have Hebrew names for illegal settlements in Lebanese territory posted before October 7th, and they made conferences well after October 7th. But that's Joe Rogan's going, yo, did you see they invaded Lebanon like a week ago? Good thing you're paying attention, guys. Kills me. So this is where we are. Openly telling you. I know, let's go ahead and add to that since it kind of syncs with the last part of the conversation. What Hegseth just told you. You know, the globalist plan that is, now, how funny would it be to start seeing Alex Jones admit to what they're doing as a globalist plan after he shouted us all down for telling him that the entire time? I bet you it happens. But then he eventually goes back to support him. I still stand by that. Hegseth unveils Greater North America, right? Graham tells you Iran is a religious war. Exactly. Greater North America. That is the technate, guys. Greater Israel. It's one part of the same kind of agenda. So in Lebanon, let me sure I missed something. Yeah, in Lebanon, as I just told you earlier, this is Mohammed Safa. He resigned from the UN to call out what they're doing. Israel destroyed the last bridge connecting southern Lebanon to the rest of the country. Okay, well, you just told us Lebanon wasn't part of this. So what's the justification here for bombing civilian There's none anywhere, by the way. But at least in Iran, for some weird reason, they've acted like it's okay. So war crime, I guess that doesn't matter. To the UN, the human rights groups at least call it out, but no one does anything about it. The internet, whatever you think the system is, whether you think it should exist or not, doesn't work. And Gaza. Is the lesson that Israel can still kill people and you'll call it a ceasefire? Apparently so. Gaza marks six months of a ceasefire that may author lessons for the Iran war. As of Thursday, it says, Israeli attacks have killed 738 people in the 6 months since the ceasefire. I mean, it's just like, I feel like the entire show could be summed up by that one thing right there. What the hell is that? So, I mean, here's the thing. You could maybe argue that the ceasefire could continue if the one side being killed argues they're willing to keep going, but that's not happening. They're not dealing with anybody. These are a bunch of Palestinians in tents they're murdering every day. And the ceasefire was supposed to be with the international. They don't care. And yet ceasefire continues in Lebanon as they murder people. Ceasefire in Gaza stresses but holds as they murder 738 people. You all know what's happening. It's just frustrating. And this picture, Amalek, not a stone on a stone. That's the pinpoint targeting of the tunnels and human shields, we were told, which apparently is literally every single location in the all of Gaza, which is what they were doing, which we all told you. And as Mohammed Safa says, U.S.-Israel war has displaced 2 million people in Palestine, more than 3.2 million people in Iran, and almost 1.5 million people in Lebanon. Think about that for a second. Over 6 million people have been displaced and driven from their homes by Israel's agenda. Nearly 7 million people Israel is forced to leave their homes across the Middle East. Here's what Trump said. This is to finish on what he was putting out into the world today and the Hormuz overlap and the larger big agenda that could connect to it. So after all we went through today, here's what Trump posted 10:30 this morning. So there you have it. He says the meeting went well. Okay, think about even saying that after what everyone's been saying, what you said, what's happening right now, and what he literally goes on to say in this post. That's what's so confounding to me. In this post, he says things that completely show the opposite of that statement. The meeting went well, he says. Most points were agreed to. What? Not true, by the way, but whatever. But the only point that really mattered, nuclear, was not. But it was because they've never said otherwise. Because that's how this is never intending to have an end to this. Effective immediately, the United States Navy, the finest in the world, will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait. So you're creating the block that you said you need to stop. That'll end the war. Okay, because that lines up, apparently. Iran has not allowed that to happen by merely saying there may be a mine out there somewhere that no, they didn't say that. And it's not, again, because, there's lots of traffic going through. It has been every day for the last, since February 28th. I've shown you every day this traffic has been there. Now, yes, tankers have been restricted. Largely, I think, because of worry, threats, and coercion by the U.S. and Israel. But most of them, other than the ones engaging with Iran, as Iran told you, are allowed to go through. Wasn't closed. So, here. For him to say that they said that, that's been denied by them. And it says that nobody knows about them, but them. So this is a really important thing to take, what I've been saying, right? So for Trump to come out and say this, for one, I think it's just blatantly clear that wasn't the reality. They floated at the beginning. And remember, the way it started, Trump comes out and goes, if they put mines, they haven't yet, but if they do, that'll be a big deal. And then 3 hours later, reports they put mines. And it was so obviously coordinated. And then no one ever brought it up again. Not until very recently. And every day since then, you saw lots of traffic going to the Strait. It's just not true, guys. They're lying to you. Not that they weren't capable of it or they don't have them. I know they're both true, but they didn't do it, it seems. And I think that's because they never intended to actually close the Strait. You realize putting a mine out there would close it because people would be worried about hitting the mine, right? So at the end of the day, his argument to say that they said this now is to keep that fear floating, to keep the idea that it's somehow Iran's fault that we may stop the Strait entirely. And it goes on to say, have also instructed our Navy to seek and interdict, as you heard, here's his post, every vessel in international waters that has paid a toll. So you're going to hunt down people who paid a normal toll like any other strait in the canal in the world to a group that has control over the strait, and you're going to do something to them? I don't know. How much you want to bet if that happens, they seize something from them? The ship, their resources, their oil? I don't know. What's the game? You're going to they paid something, so what are you going to do? Take more money from them? Charge them with a crime? You're not in charge of international waters. I mean, guys, this is going to be something serious. They're going to sink it. They're going to take something. They're going to arrest them. I don't know what else it would possibly mean. And that is a crime. There's no legal reality in that whatsoever. Well, it's not really anything they're doing right now. But you know one who pays an illegal toll, there's nothing illegal about it other than you claiming it shouldn't happen. And it's again, if you haven't understood, I did an entire point in it before. It's not unique. In fact, I'll point out something in a second that I called this would happen. But no one who pays an illegal toll will have safe passage in the high seas. So you're making it dangerous for people who do things that you don't agree with, is another way to say that. And it says we will also begin destroying the mines. Okay, well, that's not happening. And if you understand, that means, and they've already floated that earlier, we're destroying the mines, and that was shown to be a lie, right? So how are you going in and destroying the mines if you didn't have a deal with Iran and you claim they're still in control of the Strait, to the point to where you need to create a blockade to stop that? But you're just going to casually go through and take care of the mines? Because you have to laugh at how stupid that is. If you're doing that, that means they're not going to stop you from going to the Strait, but they are, and you're using military force to stop them. But in this meantime, we're going to casually go through and do what we want, because that's not stupid. And it says any Iranian who fires at us or peaceful vessels will be blown to hell. Again, you mean while you're at war with them and your military ships go through the place where they can attack you? Okay, so why would they withhold from bombing you when you're bombing them anywhere you possibly can? None of this makes any sense. It says all because of their nuclear ambition. Yes, because that's what's happening. They just want bad nuclear weapons. And no, it's not true. The blockade will begin shortly, he says. So let me know in the chat. Last I checked, that's not happening. I mean, again, we can look at the GPS, but who knows? And it says, oh, really? I was looking for whether they said something more. Now it says other countries will be involved in this. I haven't seen that yet. Iran will not be allowed to profit off this illegal act of extortion, but we can, apparently, or speaking for them, not we as a government, but they can. That's what they're going to do. They've already floated that. We may just take the toll ourselves. Yeah, so we'll do the thing that we griped about, and it's okay when we do it because we're complete hypocrites. And it says they want money, and more importantly, they want nuclear. He just can't stop. Additional, and here's what's the funniest part about this, guys. I mean, I would argue he must know that's not true. But it's either he knows it's not true or he is so far misled by people like Witkoff and Kushner. And that would mean Vance too, by the way. So he has been relayed that they were like, and we will refuse to say no to a weapon. That's what Vance said out loud. So it's certainly possible that Trump is just being gaslit by his Israeli assets. Oh, so looks like the blockade begins at 10 a.m. tomorrow, they're saying. So I guess we'll have to jump on and talk about it tomorrow if we have time. But it says, additionally, and at the appropriate moment, we are fully locked and loaded. Our military will finish up. Okay, here's a funny point. Again, finish up what's left of Iran. That's what you say when you want peace, right? But here's what's funny. Effective immediately. We'll start tomorrow. Okay, well, that's not effective immediately. So he came out and blustered online because that's what he does, right? Whereas it says at some point, where is it? There's another statement like that where it says right now, we'll begin the process of blocking the ships. Yeah, it's in there somewhere. There's another example like that. We're starting right now. But so effective immediately, we're going to do that. And that turns into tomorrow at 10 a.m. Okay, well, that probably means it'll turn into a week from now when we have another negotiation. Maybe, maybe not. I find it right now, he's probably desperately trying to make this happen, trying to get people to support this effort, and it's probably not happening. We'll report tomorrow. We'll let you know. When I see something, I'll share it. To me, I don't believe it. Or at the very least, it won't happen. That's not to say they're not capable of it, though, right? I very much see a world in which both of them could do this. It would just show me, if it does happen, that they're committed to driving this as far as it goes, and that makes me worried. Iranian warship sunk by the U.S. was sailing home after taking part in expedition hosted by India. That was Sri Lanka. That's March 5th, 2026, right? Anyone who fires on a peaceful or vessel, blood will be blown to hell. Okay, well, what does it apply both ways? Is it okay for you to bomb a ship in a training exercise that you took part in after they were unarmed? And we went through all of this. But what's funny, they were at war and they're a ship. Okay, then why are you going, you better not do the same thing to us? Because you guys are children and hypocrites. And you probably don't even realize you're doing it, to be quite honest. So back to this again was that's what it was. We talked about the Sri Lanka discussion in this show. If you want to check it out, it's right there. Now, on the 25th of March, right, Drop Site News put this out. Iran's parliament moves toward formalizing a plan to tariff tolls. Now, is it typical that terrorists would formalize legal plans, present things to the UN, deal with its neighbors, which they did, about coordination of this plan? Muscat, I believe is the name of the location, was discussing working with them and doing it. It was working with their allied neighbors or rather just their neighbors about how they would functionally do it. I mean, it's just so ridiculous how not even the U.S. government goes through all these plans. They'd say the UN is Hamas or whatever, do whatever they wanted. And meanwhile, Iran is going through legal channels, whatever you think about them. And then my point, what I said was, this is what every other place in the world does. They'd never done it before. So I said, watch as the usual suspects frame this as either unprecedented, which they've already done, or active terrorism, which they've already done, even though it seems to be a common practice just about everywhere else. Little engagement, who cares? Exactly what ended up happening, but that's the life of TLAV. So here, is his post from the 9th. There are reports that Iran is charging fees to tankers going through the Strait. They better not, and they're stop now. Okay, same thing. Either Trump is wildly uninformed and nobody's telling him what's going on because they're either afraid or they're misleading him, or he knew that and just decides to make a big statement about it when everyone knew it was building. My point is, you can look to these things on March 25th. They have a legal framework going through. It was published by multiple articles. It was a wide covered conversation. And then he posts this on the 9th going, hey, better not. I just heard. Maybe. They better not. It's all about making you think he's the one guiding the conversation. As always, I think it's extreme weakness, insecurity, like the need to be looked like. Who cares? Just stand up and go, well, they're going to do it, it looks like, and that's not allowed. That's what a person confident themselves would do, not make it look like you're the one driving the conversation. It's pretty sad. Now, this is the same day, the 12th. He, I guess, captioned this one and added to it. Here's what he says. Iran promised to open the Strait of Hormuz. Okay. Sure, first, it wasn't closed, Trump. And see, this is the game. They never did. It wasn't the case. It was only shut to you. But they also argued, not we'll open it, but we'll go back to the way it was before this started if you allow us to control it and allow us to give tolls. So the idea that they promised to open the Strait is just not true, unless he promised to give them everything they wanted, which is kind of what I think happened to get them to the table. And it says, and they knowingly failed to do so. No, they didn't. Now, what are you saying right here? On the 12th, you're saying they failed to do so after they offered to open the Strait. Well, realize right now the Strait is open. Or rather, technically before that, it is open now. It's not closed. It's back to the point where they're claiming they're going to restrict it to people that are adversarial. Leading up to the 11th, this is important. I see no indication that Iran was stopping anybody. Of any kind. Now, what you can notice, though, is it still didn't really change that much. There was a little bit more, but ultimately that's because the agreement that U.S. made restricted that flow. And I think there was also an effort from the U.S. and Israel, in my opinion, to stop people, whether through threats of mines or whatever else, which is why Trump floated the mine conversation. Now you got random people going, what, there's mines in there? I'm not going to go through there. Right? So you created that situation. So for you to say that in the meantime they failed to do so is a lie. Because as far as I can tell, they didn't do anything. People just chose not to go through because of your false narratives, or however you want to look at that. So I just want to be clear about they knowingly failed to do so. It wasn't closed in the first place, and it technically was open this entire time. This caused anxiety, dislocation, and pain to many people in countries throughout the world. This is what I've been saying the entire time. That's what they were trying to cause. So Trump and the rest of them are trying to cause this anxiety about what might happen. And now what we see is them offering to actually close it. Seems they wanted this the entire time. It says they say they put mines in the water. Again, the same thing repeated in the one he's captioning. And even though all of our Navy and most of our mine droppers have been completely blown up or there. Okay. Well, it seems that's not true, but what does that even matter? So they put them in even though the point is there's mines in the water. Guess what? There's not. And it says, as they promised, they better begin the process of getting this international waterway open and fast. Every law in the book is being violated by them. What? No, it's not. But that doesn't matter, right? Because facts don't matter for people that blindly support this comical man. Of course, what law is being violated? I'd love for someone to break that down for me in any real sense. The Strait is not the violation of the law. In fact, I'll show you something in a second that verifies the international reality of their international waters. It's not some open space that has to be controlled by everybody. It's not the reality. So what laws are being broken? You started a legal war. They responded. I mean, you could go down a list, guys. They lie and bluster. Who's breaking all the laws? Well, the ones literally in front of you breaking all the laws that just claims other things. You know exactly who I'm pointing to. Where's the last part there? Yeah, just they promised international waters open and fast. That's the reason he typed it like that, because that's the narrative they're spinning right now. We'll go to it in a second. Iran is unwilling. And again, you have to understand, international waters, it is not. You're literally talking about a location where we'll come back to it. I have to change the lens where it shows those gray lines. Well, in that location, the gray lines meet. So you either have Omani waters and you have Iranian waters. That's it. There is no international in between that location. That's the point. And they're just trying to deceive people who don't know what they're talking about. Or worse, they don't know what they're talking about. You know, it says Iran is unwilling to give up its nuclear ambitions. Again, like why would you even need to reiterate all this stuff? It was like an hour later. Just yelled it all again. There's a reason for that. In many ways, the points that were agreed to are better than us continuing our military operations to conclusion. But all of those points don't matter compared to allowing nuclear power to be in the hands of. Okay, wait. So this is, I think he thought this was savvy, but it actually hurts him. First of all, they're not unwilling. Same point. They said they're willing to give this up from day one. They're not even seeking it from day one. Then he goes, in many ways, though, despite that they're refusing to give up nuclear weapons, in many ways, the points that were agreed to, which appear to be none, by the way, are better than us continuing military wars against them. But all of the points that they did agree to don't matter, but they didn't, remember, don't matter compared to the nuclear point, which they're not actually denying. So basically what you're saying is hypothetically, I know it gets confusing, hypothetically, were they saying, we won't give up nuclear weapons? Okay, well, remember, every country in the world has that right. So there's not even a legal barrier for that. So you're telling me they agreed to every other thing you want. I don't buy that, but that's what they're saying. And just because of the thing that every other country's allowed, you said, no, we're not going to let that happen. Okay, well, so fine. Even if that was the truth, you're still the one stopping this from changing. You're still the one holding peace from happening based on something that every country in the world has a legal right to. That'd be the reality. But on top of all of that, I don't think they are seeking nuclear weapons. I don't think they have an interest in doing so. And I think I know they've already offered to give it all up. And I also argue they didn't agree to the points he's claiming they did right here. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. That shows you right there he's not honest. Or he's being misled by other very dishonest people. Either way, it's the same point. So back to this. Let's go to the point where tankers are. Same thing. Okay, so right here, there's no international water right there. In between this right here, you can see my mouse, right? That's international waters. On this side of it is all Iranian national waters. On this side is all Omanian. See, the further you go out, the in-between part, that's international waters. It's locations like that where the U.S. government was murdering people in the Caribbean, murdering fishing boats that have no legal right to engage with in any way. My point, though, is that clearly in this location right here, the islands, there's multiple locations that are usable. That in every sense of every location in the world, especially when they deal with their allies, or their neighbors, which it seems they're doing, that it's no different than every other location. The only difference is Iran has never done this before. All this time, they could have been. They would have got the same pushback. That's probably why they didn't, but they have not. And so now what Trump is saying is we're going to initiate a blockade and stop everybody from going through, which is what he claimed was already happening, but it was not. And there's a very big argument for why that might be happening. Now, before we get to that, Arnaud Bertrand writes, that's Hussein Haqqani, who, oh, look at that. If he got fact checked too, that's funny because he's wrong. Says the Strait of Hormuz is international strait. He's wrong. Under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. It's so funny. People come up with these, they sound like they know what they're talking about. Which Iran has not ratified. All ships and aircraft enjoy freedom of navigation. Okay. The applicable is transit passage, not freedom of navigation. Transit passage gives coastal states regulatory authority over sea lanes. Yep. But see, they won't care. Oh, UN is Hamas or whatever, because that comes from a UN page. It doesn't matter. Facts don't line up. They'll just give you whatever narrative they want. They'll argue, well, whether law or not, this is what it should be. Doesn't matter. But it does, though. Because right now they're lying. Right now they're lying. Right now they're breaking the law. Israel, the United States. Arnaud Bertrand writes that's completely false. The Strait, Hormuz, which is at its narrowest, only 21 nautical miles, is Iranian and Omanian territorial waters. Under the UN, the applicable regime in transit passage, not freedom of navigation. Transit passage gives coastal states regulatory authority over sea lanes. And the point is moot anyway, since, as Haqqani himself notes, Iran never ratified the UN element. You cannot invoke it against them while calling it non-negotiable. That's Israeli type propaganda. You'll take it whichever way you can get it. So either way you look at this, guys, they're in the wrong. But honest people are already seeing that. Now, for the mines, Hood of Alabama. First, DD Geopolitics posts this, saying CENTCOM announces U.S. forces have begun mine clearance. Now, we just went through this in regard to the other points where there were no, first of all, Iran denied it, which they could lie, but there was no evidence of these things happening. And more points they'll add here, but saying 2 guided missile destroyers transited the Strait under the guise of drones or stopping, mines in the water. Underwater drones will join the clearance effort, blah, blah, blah. Okay. They're just saying what the U.S. said. Now, Moon of Alabama says BS. Destroyers don't do mine clearing. They are not equipped for it, and hitting a mine could easily sink them. These were sent out as provocations during the ceasefire. Let's see how Iran handles them. Now, I'm arguing anyway that I don't see the evidence for this. At the very least, they began and turned away. I don't believe they actually went through the Strait for many reasons, but I could definitely be wrong. There's a lot of stuff that's up in the air right now that's very hard to verify because of deliberate efforts to hide these things. But next point, Iran unable to find mines that it planted. That's a weird thing to say, right? From the idea that we have to remove the mines, then this speaks to why make it such a belligerent, why be so bombastic about it? You could just say what you said at first. There are mines we're trying to stop, right? To then go on to say, well, Iran is unable to find them, as if they're involved with the process. You didn't need to add that layer to the lie. I think that clearly, one, shows the lie and also shows you that they need people to think that Iran is capitulating somehow. Because Iran denies it, and now we're finding out that the elements of the mines itself seem to be wildly fabricated. You could argue that maybe they were lying about it and the ships went through, as a show of force. But to argue that Iran was involved with trying to find them, I just think that seems absurd. It is absurd. According to U.S. officials. Because, yep, there's your giveaway. And I said, I don't buy it. This is just my opinion. I didn't look too deep into it. I just generally already, based on what I already knew and where it was, I just didn't buy it. And I said, obviously possible, but seems highly unlikely this happened to begin with. All the traffic that has been going through, for one, and just how consistently the U.S. lies. But you see right there, people are going to go, but it's been shut if they're only looking at mainstream alternative and mainstream media. It hasn't been shut. And then I saw this later and I tagged it. And this is Gandalf saying, Trump says the U.S. has begun clearing mines from the Strait. Here's the problem. The 4 dedicated U.S. Navy minesweepers stationed in Bahrain were decommissioned in September 2025 and physically removed from the region in 2026, 7 weeks before Operation Epic Fury began. Their replacements, 3 littoral combat ships, are currently in Southeast Asia. The sensors on those ships struggle to detect mines in clear California coastal waters. The Strait of Hormuz is turbid. Pre-mission calibration alone takes 6 hours per sortie. A single equipment failure, towhook, crane, Data link grounds the entire system. The allies who actually know how to do this job, Poland, France, UK, Germany, all said no. Experts say even under ideal conditions, clearing a visible shipping lane takes until late summer at the earliest. Yeah, so they're lying to you. So it says, so what exactly is Trump beginning? All right, the lie is the point. Who knows what's actually going on? But add that to every other point, and I think it becomes self-evident. This is not really what's happening. Now, this is what I was saying before. All this talk, he already said this, but this is just when I saw it for the first time. Trump says the U.S. Navy will immediately blockade, immediately meaning, I guess, tomorrow morning. All this talk of closing the Strait, while it's never actually been closed, just restricted for those illegally attacking Iran, for Trump to effectively close it. If this happens, they want the world to think it was closed, lied about mines, etc. They clearly always wanted this to come to pass. Here's what Trump posted in regard to the naval blockade. Trump posted an article. It says Trump's first through social after the Vance left Pakistan. And it says the article argues that Trump could flip Iran's Hormuz toll booth strategy. And they've already floated this idea from U.S. government people against it, basically stationing U.S. warships at the Strait's 21-mile choke point to physically control the vessel's pass, cutting off Iranian oil exports, and squeezing China and India, Tehran's two largest customers, into pushing for a deal. Quote, it would be very easy for the U.S. Navy to exert complete control over what does and does not go into that strait. I very much disagree with that. They all our U.S. experts of foreign policy love to scream about the, supremacy of the U.S. until it doesn't happen. Or, like our economic experts were like, we're stronger than ever. And then our country collapsed in 2008. It's the way this broken propagandized system works. These people are experts on the lies about Iran and don't even realize that, it seems. But either way, the point, and I could certainly be wrong, is that so you're going to close the Strait, even though it has been closed, and then you're going to start taking a toll. It's funny how that, and if that ends up that way, it's funny how, it ultimately ends up where you just seize the things you claim they were going to try to do, as if that makes it not the same thing in reverse. I mean, how often do I say that? If you're just doing the same thing back, then you're just as bad as them. If you think that's bad, why is it good for you to do it? But either way, this is a military blunder. This will end up a catastrophe. I mean, it already is, if you understand what's happening. So I'm wondering, this might be just his last ditch effort to get them to pull back. I don't know. But to finish, he just posted this on the 10th. World's most powerful reset. Isn't it strange to see this now after all that we've been discussing? And I've gotten so much, a lot of us have. Let me real quick. Hold on. I just want to give her a shout out because she does good work. And I was reaching out to do an interview. Oh, a clear thought is what the account is. Let's make sure I didn't say it wrong. No, just a thought. Excuse me. Just a thought. And I appreciate her work. And she's also, we've gone back and forth for a while now. And basically, she's been calling this out for a long time. We've been calling this out for a long time. A lot of people have been calling out this kind of engineered transition. Ian Davis, I'm trying to get him on for an interview to go over his, he's been on this longer than I have. This discussion about almost exactly the same kind of thing, the Praxius and Prospera and the network state agenda, but how it overlaps with basically, it's the new control structure. It's exactly what we're talking about. Very well done. He just put out a new article for Unlimited Hangout. I'm probably going to go through it. It's very long, but it's worth your time. But that he says this, the world's most powerful reset. It's like, well, this is the Great Reset, guys. It's part of the same conversation. I don't know why people can't see that. And as True Stream Media writes, we're going to do the biggest reset, the best reset, the reset like at a level like nobody's ever seen before. And it'll be like the world's most powerful reset than ever before. The most powerful, best, biggest of biggest, best, powerful, best resets nobody's ever before golden age. It's exactly the joke I make all the time. Just like this bombastically stupid, unnecessarily over the top. That's what he does. But but reset, the thing we're not supposed to say. Well, he already put this out as well. This is from the next day. The day after, from the White House. World's most powerful reset. Well, technically, it's reiterating what he said, but NATO chief says the world is absolutely safer under Trump. Oh, is it? You mean, is that evidenced by the extra war and the more suffering and the chaos and loss of rights, or whatever place in the world you're talking about? It's objectively worse than it was before. It's a stupid statement. But I said it's almost like they're admitting what many of us have warned about for years. This is the Great Reset that never stopped. Trump is resetting the world. Look at that. I put it in the exact right spot. I just kind of threw it down there earlier. But I mean, you keep getting this from them, right? They're telling us this is part of a reset. Now, this is something that's been going around. Now, I want you to be very skeptical about this for a lot of reasons. Now, what I basically am going to get into with Corbett tomorrow, it'll be later tomorrow, so it might not come out until tomorrow. But just this idea. Now, think about everything we just went through, right? Everything we just talked about. And ask yourself whether this might be a means to an end. And even potentially involving Iran. It's not impossible. It's unlikely, I would argue, with what's currently happening, but just like other situations, like COVID-19, we saw something that was hard to imagine. Adversaries in lockstep around an agenda to control your life, or at least you could argue to keep you safe. I don't think that's what happened. So what this is about to show you is an idea. Now, it's framed as sort of like the mastermind of Trump, right? That Trump, while he's being called a loser and destroying the economy, is secretly doing this for the long-term interest of the American interest. To me, it's like, oh, real again? Like everything under the sun for the Q and Trump movement is just like this. Just trust the plan because tariffs are going to come back around. Well, we already see that's not true. So, it's just, so I very much want to stress skepticism. But the reason I think it's interesting is two reasons. One, it very well may be what they're aiming for, whether or not they can accomplish it. And that means like some kind of inversion of the reality to justify, or rather kind of bolster what I think largely this government is trying to push through the world. But also, this is kind of funnier, but it makes sense to me, is that right now you've got them spinning out. Like, I do believe they have these larger plans, or at the very least, there's kind of an unelected power structure, technocracy that does want this, and it'll apply it to the next administration. It'll apply it to as long as they can until they get it in place. But then ultimately, you've got the situation where Trump is spinning out, and they're losing, and ultimately are just so desperate. And ultimately, this video passes Trump. And somebody tags him on Truth Social, and he goes, "Oh, let's just pretend that's what we're doing." Like that's perfect. That's exactly. So I can basically fail in every way. And I can be like, that's what we're trying to do, is help America. And I'm just like, man, it's such a perfect hanging point to be like, no matter how bad it gets, it's Trump's plan to basically invert the world in the interest of the U.S. power structure. And it's like, how does that even sound like it's in the interest of Americans? It's in the interest of the oligarchy that you can ultimately give more power to the government structure to control the global dynamic, and that maybe in the long term, that will end up giving Americans more agency. I just think that's insane, especially since your government never wants that for you and has demonstrated that your entire life. But that the middle part means, even if you see that endpoint, death and destruction and chaos for everybody. But yeah, #winning, I just find that really hard to wrap my mind around. So I just want you to think about that. The idea that this very well could be an actual reset that we should be on guard to, but also that it could just give him some kind of easy pass, like claiming Israel forced him is an easy way for them to go, well, Trump's not responsible. Just be critical, be skeptical, consider all possibilities, question everything. So I'm going to play this. I'm going to come back and play one more video, but I want you guys to think about this.
Hey, so what if Trump is not an idiot? What if losing the war in Iran is exactly the plan? Let me show you something the media will never tell you. So everyone is saying Trump is destroying America. He is fighting an unwinnable war in Iran. He is threatening to invade with ground troops. He is pissing off NATO by threatening Greenland. He is picking fights with Canada, Mexico, Denmark, Colombia. JP Morgan says the world will run out of oil by mid-April. The global economy is about to collapse. Trump looks like the worst president in history, a complete buffoon, right? But what if that's the whole point? What if Trump wants to lose the war in Iran?
Again, and this is what a lot of people, even the comments, are saying who support him, I don't think that's in him. I said that about the other examples, but if you're desperate enough, you'll do just about anything. Or if you're blackmailed enough, you'll do just about anything. But my personal opinion, I don't see Trump being capable of making himself look this bad. Even if it's for some kind of long-term, like, you'll be the best president in history forever because you enshrine the U.S. power structure, whatever, that in this meantime, that you look like a fool. I don't see it being in him to play that role. It's because he'll lie about the most benign, most inane things just for no reason. I think just because he wants to project power. And even though you can see through it. And so it's like, if you're going to do that, I just find it hard to believe he would do this, but worth considering.
What if he wants the American empire to collapse? What if he wants to destroy the global economy? Then he would be a genius. Let me explain. Right now, the world gets 20% of its oil from the Middle East. Japan gets around 75% from the Middle East. India gets around 60%. China gets around 50%. Europe is also heavily dependent. But here's the thing, oil is not rare. Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves. Canada has massive reserves. United States has massive reserves. Trump just took over Venezuela in January. He's threatening to take over Canada. You see where this is going. If Trump closes the Strait of Hormuz by fighting Iran, the Middle East oil stops flowing, but North America is still pumping. Suddenly Europe, China, Japan, South Korea, they all would need American oil. And not just oil, fertilizer too.
And you see why this is interesting with what I've been talking about, right? Like that clearly it was never closed, but they've been selling the idea that it's always been closed. And now it seems he's rushing in to effectively close it. So it does kind of bolster this idea, but don't let that guide you. You know, just because things connect doesn't mean that it's the case, but it's interesting. It's worth consideration.
The nitrogen for food production also comes from the Middle East. If that's cut off, where do they turn? There are only two options, North America and Russia. Trump is making the entire world dependent on the resources he controls. Now here is the genius part. Who owns the most US debt? Who's financing America's $39 trillion? It's Japan, China, Taiwan, South Korea, UK, France, Belgium, and Luxembourg. The same countries that need Middle East oil. There's been this fear that these
pretty compelling
countries would stop buying US Treasury bonds, that they would move to gold or Swiss francs, that America's Ponzi scheme would collapse. But now they need American energy. They need American resources. They can't abandon the dollar. They are trapped. Trump just turned America's biggest weakness, its debt, into its greatest weapon. By starting
so even that alone, it kind of gives you that feeling that it's like, oh, so they can just fail spectacularly, or at the very least, enrich themselves at American citizens' expense forever until finally you just go, oh, well, now we're going to turn that and be our best secret weapon. It's like, well, it just feels like a way to make it feel as if they've always been fighting for you when that's just not the case. So I'm expressing why I'm so very on guard against this kind of idea, at the very least to sell it to you as something in your interest, even if it is true.
An unwinnable war in Iran, he's forcing the entire world to depend on North America. This isn't new. Putin already proved that this strategy works in Ukraine. Russia has been fighting for 5 years. It's a slow grind, but it has restructured Russia's entire economy around war production, drones, ammunitions, and military manufacturing. Russia went from importing Iranian drones to making their own and now exporting them to Iran. Putin's plan was that the world is collapsing anyway, so why not build a fortress, make Russia self-sufficient, control the resources, and weather the storm. America saw this and said, we can do the same. Greenland for rare earth minerals, Canada for oil and resources, Venezuela for oil reserves, Mexico for manufacturing.
Who cares about human life and international law and whatever else we've always claimed we're fighting for, which that's important to hear, right? Because you may be going, yeah, good, take control. But at the end of the day, that means, so no, we don't care about every other thing they claim they're fighting for: constitutional rights, international law, domestic law, anything, because they're violating all of these things by doing all of this.
Panama Canal for trade control. So maybe Trump is not being reckless. He is actually building a self-sufficient North American fortress while the rest of the world burns. So yes, Trump looks like an idiot. Yes, he's losing the war in Iran. Yes, he's destroying the global economy. But if the goal was to end the American empire and rebuild it for Americans, to make the world dependent on US resources while everyone else collapses, then Trump might go down as the greatest American president in history. Maybe the New World Order is dead.
And then you are the Americans that collapse in that process until the whatever end ups get to have that benefit, right? There's a collapse, a struggle in between all of this where the entire global economy collapses, which a lot of people will die.
And maybe we are heading towards a Trump world order.
But you could see why there's something in there that's worthy of discussion, right? But I think it's very much packaged with a lot of kind of pro-Trump, trust the plan kind of idea that it ends up in some kind of new empire for Americans. I mean, why does that even make sense? Why would these people build back the thing that limits their power? Think about that for a second. Why would they have the ability to do whatever they want at that point? And you're going to tell me they're going to re-enshrine themselves and commit that comes from people that somehow see them still magically as people fighting for you or fighting for international, for law or for freedom or even for American interests. I mean, guys, wake up. If you still think that's what they're doing, I mean, have you not seen some of their leading supporters completely turn around and go, they're a complete... Now, I don't even think it's because they're honest. I think it's because they recognize the whole world sees it. But either way, they're not actually fighting for you. Now, I plan on having this conversation more in depth with Corbett tomorrow. Oh, this is just Thomas Paine saying effing, there's a lot of comments down here going, this is the stupidest thing. So I agree. There's a lot of skepticism, I think, from where this comes from. I'm not actually sure who originally posted it, but either way, worth it. I'm worried about the way that this all goes. And I guess my prime worry on this point is that this will fool enough people to support like the end of what we are in the interest of the idea that you think you're gaining it all back. It's like a last-ditch effort to get you to support your own subjugation. And I feel like that's everywhere you look. At the very least, please consider that as we go forward in this. Now, I'm going to end with a video that was put out. Well, it technically is a mini documentary created by T. Snyder. He has the Conspiracy Synergy platform, and he does amazing work. This is posted by the Independent Review, and it's a post. Basically, it's filmed with the overlap of the stuff we did in this studio with Steve, and I've actually never gotten around to doing my little kind of walkthrough in the studio. I probably should at some point, but you get to see inside the studio here, so you get to see kind of the way this looks from a different angle. And it was about Steve though, so enjoy this. It's a few minutes. It'll be ending. I'll play the outro when this ends. But it's nice, it's kind of a little break from all the chaos out there, and just to, hear Steve and talks about kind of our relationship and talks about what he's trying to do. And, Steve is just probably one of the most genuine people I've ever met in my life. And I'm honored to be able to work with him. And it's nice to be able to have people in this field who are who they are, no matter what, love him or hate him. Steve is who he is to a fault. And that's exactly how I see my, I will be who I am no matter what. I know, and the same thing, I know my faults. I know who I am. I know what I fail at and what I do. And I strive to be better in all those areas. But that's why it's more difficult for some of these people out there to kind of like use your weaknesses against you and pitch you against your neighbors, because I'm not insecure about who I am. I know who I am. I like who I am. And the same thing for Steve is like, it's something that is contagious, And I think that when you come across real people like that in this field and you start to see, remember what real engagement is like and what the world can be like when people are, having human experience without preconditions and without politics. It's sad what we lose in all of this. So thank you for tuning in today and remembering what we're all fighting for and what really matters in life. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Man, I'm just happy to be here at all. This is crazy.
You go first.
I was going to say, man, the state is an illegitimate entity that only exists to perpetuate itself.
Oh, that's a better way. That's even more broad.
Does so through theft, extortion, and violence.
Government.
Yeah.
That's even too broad for some people, I would argue.
It doesn't matter what state, sorry, commies.
Exactly. Government. That's the thing. It's like whether it's democracy or communism, or it's a power structure that consolidates power over time to control your life every fucking time. Look back through history.
And specifically, technocracy is a 100-year-long agenda that's, specifically that. It goes back, centuries or what, but specifically like the technate.
Yeah, right.
Which includes Greenland all the way down to the Panama Canal.
What they just put out there as the future plan, right?
Yeah, the North American Union, and now perhaps voluntarily becoming a part of the British Commonwealth. Whenever you start to take yourself too seriously, you fucked up. And whenever you start to believe that whatever it is you think you're up against is going to win, that's when they're going to win, which is retarded. So don't do that.
So we were just talking yesterday. Was that? Wait.
Well, okay. Let me brag on Ryan, because there aren't too terribly many people in the independent media space that are nightmarishly objective. And Ryan is the most nightmarishly objective person I know. He goes above and beyond to make sure that there's evidence to support what his gut instinct is, and he'll even like hold off on his gut instinct for a frustratingly long amount of time until evidence corroborates it. And that's rare. That's an amazing characteristic. I don't have that. I don't. I see something, it smells weird, I'm like, oh hey, that smells weird. What are you doing? Stop eating grass. Come here. Dork. But it's truly been like an immense privilege to get to know Ryan, to be a legitimate friend, to like trust this guy, and then also to be a part of the Independent Media Alliance that he co-founded with Whitney Webb and Derek Bros. And it includes some of the heavier hitters in the entire space and people who didn't fall for the bullshit no matter what the bullshit was. Pick a bullshit. They didn't fall for it. So, yeah, man. I really am happy to be here at all. I really am.